So, und da sind wir wieder. Und wie immer am Anfang eines Panels muss ich einmal ein bisschen herumruckeln, ein bisschen herumbauen, damit das hier auch im Zoom, beziehungsweise im Stream sauber aussieht, weil das sich immer mal wieder verschiebt, freundlicherweise. Ihr seht auch oben schon, dass wir ein paar Retrokompottis da haben. Die begrüßen wir selbstverständlich gleich auch nochmal standesgemäß. Dann warten wir auf unsere Gäste und harren der Dinge, die da heute noch kommen. Also vielen, vielen Dank nochmal an alle, die beim Retro-Bingo mitgespielt haben. Das war wirklich der Hammer. Und ich sage da oben immer noch, ich muss noch mal kurz ein bisschen schieben. Wundert euch nicht, dass es hier gerade ruckelt. Beim Retrokompott ist manchmal ein bisschen geruckelt in Ordnung. So.
Retrokompott.
Beim Retropod. Zack, jetzt machen wir den Robin noch mal unten kleiner. So.
Und ein kleiner, noch kleiner?
Ich habe nicht gesagt den kleinen Robin, ich habe gesagt den Robin kleiner.
Oh,
So.
Oh Gott.
Entschuldigung, ich habe vorhin Proxy
Ja, der Robin wirkt so knuddelig.
Oh.
Ja, ich sehe aus wie ein großes blaues Bärchen, hat meine Frau mal gesagt.
Ja, so, dann sind wir jetzt soweit. Das große blaue Bärchen ist auch fertig.
Plüschi-Bärchen.
Ja, wir begrüßen euch hier zum Abschlusstalk unserer Gala. Wie lange das dauert, wissen wir nicht. Da oben steht in der Einblendung, wir sind heute auf Englisch. Das sind wir natürlich erst, wenn englische Gäste kommen sollten, was geplant ist. Erstmal begrüße ich die Kompottis, die ja in der Runde sind. Wen sehen wir denn da? Miriam hat den Ton noch aus. Ja, der Robin ist da, klar, aber...
Hallo, ich habe ausgeschlafen.
Ja, das war toll. Können wir gerne noch mal darauf eingehen. Ich saß hier und schrieb dir noch eine lustige WhatsApp. Nicht, dass du wieder 3 Sekunden vorher auftauchst. Nein, er tauchte gar nicht auf. Egal. Wir haben den Michael da. Er lacht sich schon ins Bild. Hallo, Michael.
Servus nochmal.
Dann ist der Ingo da, der gerade seine Steam-Keys zählt.
Ja, ich bin auch etwas müde von gestern Abend, weil irgendwie, nachdem wir das Ganze beendet hatten, ging es ja noch bis 2 Uhr irgendwie. Wir haben noch bis 2 Uhr dann geschnackt und
2:25 Uhr.
noch schwer.
Hat der Gurke erst zugeschaut?
Ja, und ich war dann sowas von müde.
Ich kann das ja mal als Gag vorweg erzählen. Ich wollte die ganze Zeit eine Gurke essen, aber ihr wart so komisch drauf, dass ich Angst hatte, eine Gurke zu essen live. Okay, soweit
Es sah pervers aus.
Am Stück? Ah.
Und wir begrüßen auch den Danny, um das Thema gleich wieder abzulenken. Hallo Danny, schön, dass
Schönen guten Abend in die Runde.
Ja, du hast gestern nichts verpasst. Alles gut.
Hashtag grüne Gurke.
Nein, das hat ja keiner gesehen, das wurde ja nicht mal aufgezeichnet.
Verdammt.
So, ich werde jetzt mal einige unserer Gäste anschreiben, dass wir theoretisch da sind. Vielleicht kommen sie ja da auch dazu. Wir gucken mal. Ansonsten quatschen wir einfach ein bisschen. Robin erholt sich noch von seinem Laufen und dann gucken wir mal, wo es uns dann wieder hintreibt. Wenn ihr bitte redet, dann bin ich auch nicht mehr zu sehen. Danke.
Soll ich rülpsen? Ich kann die deutsche Nation... Ach ne, das habe ich schon gestern gesagt. Ich kann euch jetzt schon sagen, falls nachher einer der Besucher kommt, dann wird dieses Spiel etwas damit zu tun haben.
Wenn er kommen sollte, das wird die Frage sein, weil er hat sich schon entschuldigt wegen gestern. Er hatte bis 3 Uhr morgens eine Konferenz und war fix und fertig und ist dann eingeschlafen.
Kenn ich irgendwoher.
Ja, vielleicht schafft er es heute, ich weiß es nicht. Ich habe ihn eben nochmal angeschrieben. Matthew Cannon hat mir einen Finger hochgeschickt, dass ich gesagt habe, wir sind live.
Den hier?
Einen Daumen hoch. Oh mein Gott, ich bin heute auch schon. Ich habe den Fehler gemacht heute, das gebe ich auch gerne zu, wieder mal die Sendung so zusammenzulegen, dass ich keine Pause hatte und mich daher vorhin einmal ganz kurz finalisieren musste. Ich hatte wieder vergessen zu essen, wie immer. Ich muss also das nächste Mal ein Panel ohne mich in die Abendstunden legen, sonst vergesse ich das Essen. Also Memo an mich selber, das müssen wir noch mal.
Aber wenn du jetzt eine Gurke hast, darfst du die auch gerne jetzt essen.
Ich werde hier keine Gurke öffentlich essen.
Ah, wie schön.
Hashtag Greenscreen-Gurken.
Ja, das war das Hauptproblem. Das war das Hauptproblem. Du hast es ja nicht gesehen. Ich erkläre es gerne. Meine grüne Gurke verschwand in meiner Hand und sobald ich sie in die Nähe des Gesichts führte, wurde sie braungrün. Okay? Und während ich reinbiss, war sie wieder unsichtbar.
Hashtag Big Jim.
Und deswegen dachte ich mir so, Gurken nicht vor einem Greenscreen. Regel Nummer 1. Ich trinke auch inzwischen nur braune Biere und keine grünen Biere mehr, weil die sehen vom Greenscreen auch einfach scheiße aus.
Sind denn braune Biere?
In braunen Verpackungen.
Achso.
Lieber dann hast du ja noch gesagt, wenn du reingebissen hast, in die Gurke hat die gespritzt.
Oh Gott, Alter, ey.
Lieber Greco, solche Sätze möchte ich nicht im Chat sehen. Wir entziehen dir Preise, wenn du so weitermachst.
20 Uhr, das Niveau ist schon ganz unten angekommen.
Ja, aber jetzt schon um 20 Uhr, Dani. Gestern hat es mindestens bis 23 Uhr gedauert. Also,
Ich fühle mich wohl, ich habe kein Problem
Davor
damit.
war Nick Wilder da.
Und die Miri ist ja noch gar nicht da.
Nein, die ist stumm geschaltet. Vielleicht ist sie jetzt eine Gurke. Ich weiß es ja nicht. Oh Mann.
Aber zumindest nicht vom Greenscreen.
Ja.
Oh
Habt
Gott.
habt ihr auch noch normale Themen?
Mein Bettchen war so warm vorhin. Ich habe einfach
Ich
weiter
krieg-
geschlafen.
Nein, ich kriege gerade wieder eine WhatsApp, ob ich eine Gurke haben möchte.
Bin etwas irritiert gerade.
Schönen guten Abend, Peter Noster.
Oh, Peter.
Hallo Peter. Ja, wir sind noch so ein bisschen in
Ist der
der.
verpasst.
Nein, die Gurke kommt erst später. So. Ach mein Gott, was ist das wieder hier? Ich frage mich manchmal, wo ich hier gelandet bin. Aber wie war das immer so schön? Die Geister, die man rief. Na?
50 Jahre Top 3 Talk.
Ja, das haben wir auch gerade in der Pause gelernt, dass Ingo keinen Joke gemacht hat. Ich fand das so witzig, wie er sagte, herzlich willkommen zu 50 Jahre Top 3 Talk. Das war ein Versprecher. Ich dachte, das war ein Witz.
Nee, das war ein Versprecher. Also gut. Wobei Michael hat mir ja geraten, ich sollte das als Absicht deklarieren. Also
Ja,
das
das
war
hast du doch-
absichtlich.
Deswegen ist es auch gut, dass du jetzt nochmal erklärt hast, dass es keine Absicht war. Ja.
Komm, Patrick, mach mal.
So,
Tanzfilme.
der Manfred kommt dazu. Der kann ja
Oh,
schon mal
müssen wir jetzt Englisch sprechen?
Ja, hello, Mr. Brewer.
Bauer. Hallo, Bauer.
Hallo, Chuck.
Hallo zusammen. Was habe ich wieder angestellt? Furchtbar.
Noch nix.
Noch nichts, Manfred, noch nichts.
Ach, ich bin so.
Ich
Egal.
hoffe, dass du das Niveau erhöhst hier.
Ja, und ich hoffe, wie gesagt, dass der Matthew Cannon gleich zu uns kommt oder im Laufe der Sendung zu uns kommt. Vielleicht hat er auch die Zeitverschiebung mit einer Stunde nicht ganz mitbekommen. Das kann auch mal sein mit England. Denn, das hast du wahrscheinlich mitbekommen, Manfred, du hast ja das was hast du gespielt?
Batman the Movie, genau.
Dankeschön, oh Gottes Willen. Ja, Batman the Movie gespielt. Und da lief ja durchgängig ein Soundtrack von Matthew Cannon
Weiß
zufälligerweise.
ich.
Und
Mhm.
der war richtig toll, weil ich habe das mir angeguckt heute Morgen und ich fand auch den Soundtrack toll. Also war wirklich sehr, sehr
Der war
passend und
gut,
sehr,
ja.
sehr schön.
Was ist denn sein erstes Spiel? Können wir das mal gucken? Vielleicht haben wir das ja hier.
Kannst ja mal in die Statistik gucken.
Bei hier.
Ich habe schon wieder Wortfindungsstörungen. Das um 20 Uhr.
F29 Retaliator, das hole ich mal kurz.
Das
Ich glaube,
ist
du müsst mir noch mal kurz ausklinken. Ich habe nicht das Spiel. Ich muss erst mal suchen.
Mach mal. Wie
Bis
gesagt,
dann.
wir warten hier und gucken mal und harren der Dinge, was da kommt, auf jeden Fall. Ja, hat sonst jemand noch was zum Besten zu geben, bevor wir hier nachher die Sprache wechseln? Sachen, die man nur auf Deutsch klären kann. Nein. Hier schweigen sie alle. Ingo, sag
Ich
was.
recherchiere auch gerade ein bisschen.
Das ist sehr gut.
Ja. Ich kann ja auch seit gestern nicht viel erzählen. Ich habe zwar was gespielt, aber halt nichts Retrohaftes seit gestern.
Oh, Miriam ist wach geworden. Gurkengate. Oh, hört doch bitte mal auf.
Gurkengate.
Und Stefan hat sein eigenes Panel heute Mittag vergessen. Ja, das war aber ein gutes Panel, auch wenn du nicht dabei warst. Ah, schön.
Ja.
Ach,
Das Ultima für den Gameboy ist fast so ein Spiel, das
Ich war kurz
müsste ich in meine Sammlung
davor,
reinpacken.
es mir zu kaufen. Das ist nämlich gar nicht so teuer.
Echt?
So, je nach Version zwischen 20 und 40 Euro. Also das geht noch alles. Also außer als
Mit Box?
Nein. Mit Box bist du schon wieder im höheren Bereich teilweise. Aber das fand ich, das war ja kein Ultima, das sah ja fast aus wie ein Action-Rollenspiel oder so. Das fand ich
Hat
ganz
sich so ein bisschen
unterhaltsam.
an Zelda erinnert, ja.
Ja, Zelda mag ich nicht, aber das fand ich jetzt ganz witzig. Also vor allem vom Gameboy fand ich es cool. Das war ja, sah nett aus beim Spielen. Und mir hat es gefallen.
Gibt sogar 2 Folgen davon.
Ja.
Oh, was ich gefunden habe.
Da ist die Musik bei von
Also
Matthew.
laut Mobi ist das seit Game Credits, wenn ich auf Matthew Cannon gehe, ist das das erste Spiel 1989 F29 Retaliator.
Dann hoffen wir, dass
Das habe ich sogar gespielt, glaube
Ich
ich.
auch.
zukommt.
Ja.
Das letzte Mal online war für 50 Minuten. Also entweder kommt der Punkt 9, weil er die Zeitverschiebung nicht ganz mitbekommen hat oder nicht auf der Uhr hat, oder er taucht irgendwann zwischendurch auf. Wir warten einfach ab, was passiert. Wir sind ja sowas von flexibel im Retrokompott und sonst reden wir mit uns.
Aber
selbst.
das ist schade. Damals, in den 80ern und 90ern, gab es halt auch diese ganzen Flugsimulatoren, so mit Flugzeugen, die ja erst in so 10 Jahren erscheinen. Und sowas gibt es heute, glaube ich, gar nicht mehr. Also ich bin jetzt nicht mehr so in der Flugsimulator-Szene,
Also, du
aber
meinst sozusagen Modelle, die noch in der Planung waren? Oder die gar
genau,
nicht-
diese fiktiven Modelle.
Naja,
Ja.
der Eurofighter Typhoon war, glaube ich, auch 5 Jahre bevor er
Ich
eigentlich
bekomme
wirklich
gerade einen
flog.
Daumen hoch von Matthew. Er ist jetzt online. Da wird er wohl demnächst dazukommen.
Tatsächlich, das habe ich früher auch sehr gern gemocht, dass man so Zukunftsszenarien bekam.
Genau. Und interessanterweise war das bei den Heimcomputern ja auch gang und gäbe. Also auf dem Amiga, wenn ich mal bedenke, wie viele Flugsimulatoren da erschienen sind, das ist ja Wahnsinn gewesen.
Ja.
Und was ich da alles gespielt hatte, das war halt ein Genre, wo es halt durchaus viele Titel gab. Und heute, auf den Konsolen zumindest, da erscheint ja fast gar nichts mehr, so Flugsimulatoren. Also,
Auch es gibt diese Zukunftsflugsimulation, gibt es ja auf der PlayStation 5 oder 4, dieses Blabla Combat. Wie heißt denn
das ist scheiße.
Blabla Combat ist auch
Also
Ja,
das,
ja.
dieses, ich weiß jetzt auch, Ace Combat, oder?
Ace Combat, genau.
Ja, das ist
ja
so
Zukunft.
ein Müll, das ist so ein Dreck, ja. Das hatte mir der Oliver empfohlen und weil ich so hab was gesucht wie Afterburner. Und ich habe mir das dann gekauft und ich habe das dann nicht ertragen, weil das war dann, so wurde dann wirklich, also war so unrealistisch, also so extrem unrealistisch und ich fand das einfach nur mies. Also es hat mir überhaupt nicht gefallen.
Mhm.
Also, wir haben noch ein bisschen Zeit für unsere Gespräche. Matthew kommt hundertprozentig dazu. Er kommt um 7:45 GMT.
General Measure Time.
Das muss ich jetzt mal checken, was das
Das ist,
Greenwich
glaube ich, in einer Stunde.
in 1 oder 2
In
Stunden?
England ist es.
Ich
Das
glaub,
ist England ist minus, also England ist
Minus
0,
1.
Deutschland ist plus
das würde
1.
heißen, nach deutscher Zeit 21:15 Uhr, korrekt?
Genau, ja.
Dann machen wir um 9 nochmal eine Werbung, aber bis dahin können wir ja dann hier nochmal ein bisschen weiter quatschen. Vielleicht kommen auch noch andere dazu, das weiß ich ja nicht. Ich habe hier alle angeschrieben, die wollten. Und jetzt warten wir einfach ab und lassen uns überraschen. Ja, Ace Combat, genau, das war eben das Blabla Combat, genau.
Was hat er noch gemacht? Batman ist tatsächlich sein zweites Spiel gewesen.
Und
Also
klingt toll, ganz, ganz toll.
Operation
Aber die Musik aber wohl
Thunderbolt.
für alle Systeme gemacht.
Robocop
Welches
2,
Operation Thunderbolt.
Oh ja, natürlich.
Navy Seals, Clive Barkers Nightbreed, Adidas Championship Football, Navy Seals, Elf, Super Hunchback, Parasol Stars, Hook, oh, da müsste ich mal gucken, ob er die PC-Musik gemacht hat. Rock'n'Roll Racing, Tin Star, kennt ihr Tin Star? Kennt das nicht? Simpsons Bart and the Beanstalk, weiß ich nicht, was das ist. Ken Griffiths Jr. presents Major League Baseball. Das ist alles für Nintendo irgendwie.
Bart and the Beanstalk.
Ja, und Striker 95. Dann hört's auf.
Und was
Einfach
er
keine
danach
Lust
gemacht
mehr
hat,
gehabt,
ist
oder?
nicht bekannt, oder?
Bitte was?
Was hat er danach gemacht? Ist es bekannt oder das können wir den
Es
fragen?
gab,
Wolltest du ja fragen.
es gab ein komplettes Interview im Retrokompott. Also ich kann euch mal, wenn ihr möchtet, warte mal, wir sind ja hier so
Bart and the
flexibel.
Beanstalk.
Ich suche euch mal was raus und hau euch mal was in die. Ich hau euch mal was hier in den Chat.
Das ist ein Gameboy-Spiel. Ah, okay.
Wahrscheinlich verschiebt sich dann natürlich wieder das ganze Bild. Das weiß ich. Oh,
Miriam,
Miriam
alles
macht
gut?
Geräusche.
Ja, ich habe nur ins
Schritt-
Knie gestoßen.
Achso,
Und das
das
wolltest du-
gut.
und du
Du hast,
wolltest,
du hast dir einen Schritt gegriffen. Ich habe mir schon Gedanken gemacht.
und du wolltest es mir das alle live mitbekommen. Ich habe ein Dokument in den Chat gepackt, eben einmal für euch. Da könntet ihr raufgucken, wenn ihr das Interview, was auch auf Deutsch vorliegt, zu Matthew Cannon kurz mal mit überfliegen wollt. Da stehen die meisten Infos drin, eventuell, die ihr braucht. Bitte dort nichts ändern dran, das ist schon übersetzt. Miriam, hast du dich erholt?
Wovon?
Von den Fröschen, von dem jungen Robin, von uns allen?
So schlimm war der doch gar nicht.
Nein. War alles sehr schön. Also,
Der wird auch mit jedem Mal zahmer, habe ich das Gefühl.
Keine Ahnung.
Gleich kommt er in den
Haben
Chat
das die
und
Robins so an sich? Weiß ich nicht.
Nein, ich kenne einen Robin, der wird nicht zahmer, der wird immer schlimmer.
Der wird immer schlimmer. Umso älter wird, umso widerlicher wird er.
Genau. Können wir das bitte klippen als Beweis für die nächsten Jahre? Danke. Nein.
Meine Schwester sagt immer, wenn ich irgendwas Böses zu meiner Nichte sage, sagt er, Robin ist der Ekelonkel.
Aber der ist nicht schlecht.
Der Ekelonkel.
Okay, das muss ich klippen.
Oh,
Oh Mann.
der war echt gut. Der war echt gut. Oh mein Gott.
Was war das denn? Für Gelächter im Hintergrund. Achso,
Was?
das ist Michael, der klippt. Okay.
Ah.
Ja, ja,
Hier liegt auf falscher Soundkarte.
kann alles mal vorkommen, ja.
Also Ingo sehen wir noch ungefähr eine Stunde. Die Augen
Ja,
schon
also
in einer-
ich werde heute nicht alt. Das war wieder eine ziemlich bescheidene kurze Nacht heute irgendwie. Und morgen muss ich auch wieder arbeiten. Da ist der Urlaub dann vorbei. Und ja, das ist halt dann auch etwas. Ja, da sollte ich einigermaßen beisammen morgen zur Arbeit gehen. Das wäre schön.
Aber du bist doch Chef.
Ja, aber trotzdem gibt es einiges ja, abzulaufen.
Bei mir das
Robin hat
Gleiche.
auch
Ich
heute
muss
eins
auch
abgelaufen.
arbeiten morgen.
Hm.
Es sei denn, Patrick isst noch eine Gurke, dann bleibe ich noch ein bisschen auf.
Das ist ja auch eine
jetzt-
gewisse Vorbildfunktion, weil wenn ich jetzt dann irgendwie auftauche und sage, oh, hallo, oh, mir geht's total scheiße, ich bin total müde, ja, dann pennen die doch alle ein.
Deine Mitarbeiter sehen dich doch jetzt auch gerade alle. Und,
Ich hoffe nicht.
Da fragt mal Miriam, ob Kollegen sowas mitkriegen. Ich
Ja.
sag nur Schweineöhrchen.
Oink, oink, danke.
Zum Glück sind die Kollegen nicht sehr interessiert so in der Gaming-Welt und
Aber
in
vielleicht
der
an
Retro.
dir.
Nee, ich glaube auch nicht. Dafür ist denen die Zeit zu schade, glaube ich.
Ja, nicht, dass sie
Und-
doch in den Chat schreiben, wir wollen mehr Geld oder sowas.
Naja,
Ja.
also ab einer gewissen Summe esse ich auch wieder Gurken, aber das ist eigentlich nicht für diesen Kanal, nein.
Welche
Da
Summe
solltest du nicht
denn?
mitspielen.
Welche
ich
Summe
weiß.
denn? Welche
sag-
Summe?
Nein, ich sag dazu nichts mehr.
Genau, wir können doch jetzt mal irgendwie so Spendenaufruf machen zum
Genau,
Essen,
Ja.
gell? Dann
zum
müssen die halt dann.
Jeder,
dann
muss,
können-
also-
jeder muss irgendwas essen. Nein,
Genau, dann können die Leute, also,
Also bei
ich esse dann wieder ein paar Nüsse und
Ja, das machst du ja sowieso immer. Bei 100 € isst Patrick seine Gurke.
live vor dem Greenscreen.
super.
Also
Machen wir-
100 € spenden in den
Jetzt geht, das
nächsten
hier
10
wieder,
Minuten.
jetzt geht das hier wieder los mit euch.
Und wir machen den Ton auch schön laut, damit ihr das
Ja,
Knacken und Sapschen
Genau.
Ich muss gerade lachen, Entschuldigung. Im Cosplay vor der Kamera, genau. Robin,
Das ist Gurke, ja?
Robin, der Clip ist im.
Ja,
ist im
danke schön.
Chat.
Der Enkel.
Enkelonkel. Schön.
Der Ekelonkel.
Ekelonkel.
Das sind so Clips, die werden wir in ein paar Jahren noch sehen und überlegen, was war da los?
Oh Gott. Danke, Michael.
Michael
Keine
denkt
Ursache.
an uns. Das ist immer super.
wir hatten uns ja gestern auch noch ein bisschen so jünger gemacht mit dieser einen App. Das war ja auch noch ganz lustig.
Oh,
wo
hör
dann
auf,
plötzlich,
das war ja auch echt der Hammer.
ja, wo wir uns dann zum Baby gemacht haben oder zum Almöchi mit so langen Haaren.
Ja, aber leider funktionieren ja auch, wie gesagt, auch diese ganzen tollen Zoom-Effekte. Bei der Hälfte von uns funktionieren die ja nicht.
Ja,
Und dann mussten wir halt Ingo und Miriam zugucken, wie sie sich Ohren angeklebt haben.
genau.
Und
Genau. Und
Ingo hatte
wir hatten dann
Haare.
auch Schweinchen Miri und Schweinchen Ingo und die sahen eigentlich auch ganz ja, lustig aus.
Guck mal, Patrick, was mir heute angezeigt wird. Stimmt gar nicht, ist ja gar nicht heute. Nein, okay. Ich habe gerade, wo ist ach, jetzt ist es weg, ich kann mein Handy nicht benutzen. Vor 2 Jahren sind wir ja auf der Gamescom gewesen. Und ich habe gerade ein Bild gesehen zusammen mit Marcel, der uns dann ja besucht hat. Also der
Amiga Master.
Amiga Master.
Ja. Du musst immer dazu sagen, wir haben jeden Namen mehrfach inzwischen im Kompott.
Ja,
Ich muss da vorhin so aufpassen beim Retro-Bingo, weil wir da natürlich auch gleiche Namen dabei hatten.
ja.
Ich übertrage das auch nachher nochmal alles. Das muss ich auch noch jetzt heute schaffen, weil sonst wird das unübersichtlich. Und Robin möchte ja
Miri?
sicher-
Ja,
Schau mal nur ganz oben bei dir im Zoom. Hast du da einen Stoppknopf? Den
ja.
roten. Klick mal
Oh.
da drauf, bitte.
Okay.
Hast. Du hast
Gut.
bis gerade eben deinen Computerton freigegeben.
Oh, war ja eh nichts an, oder?
Doch, wir haben es
was meinst du,
gehört.
was wir jetzt alles gehört haben?
Was denn?
Ja. Guckst dir später
Alles
an.
auf dem zweiten Kanal läuft.
Oh, ist der
schockiert.
groß!
Da läuft nichts. Habe ich alles stumm geschaltet. Ho, ho, ho.
Auch wir haben einen zweiten Kanal für spezielle Fälle.
Ja.
Super, ey.
Das war jetzt sehr ekelhaft, Patrick.
Das
Ich
war
kann nicht-
total ekelig,
Das war aber
ey.
überhaupt nicht so gemeint.
Du solltest, ich,
Wieso
hoffe, du schläfst nicht mit offenem Mund.
Das hängt davon ab. Aber okay.
Robin.
So, Ingo, du hast was gespielt, hast du gesagt. Egal ob Retro oder nicht, lenk vom Thema ab.
Oh.
Ja, was habe ich denn gespielt? Und zwar aus dem. Jetzt rennen sie alle weg.
Weiß ich nicht, irgendeiner ist zusammengebrochen, aber ist egal. Ignorier einfach, was hier um dich herum passiert.
Robin muss so seinen Kopf freikriegen.
Und damit stehe ich hier auf die
Muss
Tischplatte
seinen
oder
Kopf
was?
aufräumen.
Das klang,
Solange er nicht mit dem Kopf voran gegen die Wand läuft.
das klang
solange
schon, als
er
wenn er
keine-
ihn auf die Tischplatte geschlagen hat.
Solange er keine Gurken sucht, ist alles gut.
Nein,
Obwohl, da hat er bestimmt welche im Regal. Halt andere Gurken.
ja, aber die werde ich auch nicht essen.
Spielegurken zählen nicht.
Also,
Oh mein Gott. Ich
Was ist mit Robin los?
weiß es nicht, er ist kollabiert wahrscheinlich. Aber das macht nichts, er hat das Retro-Bingo geschafft. Das war die Tagesaufgabe. Alles
Oh ja,
gut.
Cola-Bier nehme ich auch. Danke.
Du kollabierst?
Ja, Cola-Bier, bitte.
Mhm.
Oh,
Ja, ein dreckiges oder schmutziges.
Ja.
Ein schmutziges Cola-Bier.
Das nennt sich doch schmutziges.
Ah.
Ich kann ja schon mal sagen, alle Retro-Cards, die gestern bestellt worden sind, sind schon inzwischen im Briefkasten. Müsste also morgen früh losfahren, wollte ich gerade sagen, auf den Weg gebracht werden. Das heißt, die haptischen Karten landen auch demnächst bei ihren Besitzern. Und das geht ja auch noch weiter nach der Gala. Karten kann man immer bekommen. Ich zeige da ja mal als positives Beispiel Ingo. Der Trend geht ja, wie gesagt, zu vielen, vielen Karten. Und wir haben auch noch viele Karten da. Und wer viele Karten hat, kann viele Steam-Keys gewinnen, oder Ingo?
Genau, ja, das ist wirklich ganz praktisch, aber ich passe halt, wie gesagt, nicht immer auf und verpasse wahrscheinlich mehr als die Hälfte aller.
Schickst einfach
Gewinne.
Programm am Sonntag eine Mail.
Genau,
Mit deinen
einfach
ganzen
hier.
Nummern.
Ja,
Ich überprüfe die nicht. Ich überprüfe nur, wenn du eine einzelne Nummer schreibst. Du schickst mir jetzt nicht alle Nummern. Das wäre ja nicht korrekt.
Du schickst
Ja.
10 Mails mit jeweils einer Nummer.
Das kann ich halt dann feststellen. Ich spule einfach den Twitch-Stream zurück. Das geht ganz einfach. Und wer noch seine Nummer nicht gefunden hat, kann ja noch bis zum Ende dieser Veranstaltung, also bis irgendwann heute Abend, gerne
Ach,
gucken.
ich dachte, dein Programm schmeißt eine Liste aus mit allen Nummern, die gezogen wurden.
Das tut es auch, ja. Aber wie gesagt, auch dieses Jahr ich habe ja über 150 Nummern gezogen.
Also wenn ich jetzt sage, ich
Steuerung
habe die
F und
49,
Nummer
ich habe die
eingeben.
525 und ich habe die, keine Ahnung,
ich hab
25, dann schickst du mir 3 Steam-Keys, obwohl ich die gar nicht habe.
Nein, das tue ich nicht, weil ich habe
Siehst
eine
du?
Liste mit den Vornamen der Besitzer. Da gucke ich notfalls rein.
Ja, dann mach das auch.
Mhm.
Ich
Bei
habe nur
dir
einen
jetzt-
Steam-Key
bei-
gewonnen.
Bei
Also.
dir jetzt 100%.
Ich weiß jetzt auch nur von einem, ich habe trotzdem mal beide Nummern geschickt.
Ich habe 3 Nummern und ich habe jetzt bei einer habe ich jetzt was gewonnen. Mein Gott.
Das ist doch schon mal sehr schön.
Ja.
Ich habe
Leider
leider
nicht Chris Hülsbeck.
ich muss noch mal so spezielle,
Wer weiß.
wer weiß, ja. Im Chat wird schon gesagt, die 49 hast du auf jeden Fall nicht, Miriam.
Ja, schon klar. Das war ja auch nur ein Beispiel.
Petit Drin, schreib mir gerne noch mal eine zusätzliche Mail. Ich schicke dir auch noch mal einen Key für die Musik zu. Das mache ich gerne, das ist kein Problem. Du hast ja auch schon einmal live mit uns mitgespielt und schreib da noch mal bitte eine Mail. Ich verschicke hier auch noch mal eine andere Sache kurz zugesagt hatte. Und dann gucken wir mal. Robin ist jetzt kollabiert, der ist weg, ne? Der ist jetzt komplett aus dem
Der ist weg.
Robin? Der
Der ist
Retro-Bingo.
raus.
Der Ekelonkel vom Retro-Bingo?
der Ekelonkel ist weg.
Der Ekelonkel vom Retro-Bingo. Das ist doch echt eine schöne Formulierung.
Super. Ich glaube, der liegt irgendwo unterm Tisch und kriegt sich nicht mehr ein.
Das kann sehr gut sein.
Du
Solange,
bist eben mal kurz beim Papier, bei einer Papierwand.
solange er noch dicht ist, ist alles gut.
ich habe mir übrigens, ich habe mir jetzt den zweiten Teil von Runaway 2 gekauft auf dem iPad, weil ich habe das jetzt durchgespielt, also den ersten Teil. Ich habe nämlich ein bisschen weiter gespielt, als ihr gespielt hattet, weil ich habe das ja im Urlaub ja vorgespielt und wusste halt nicht, wie weit ich spielen soll. Und ich habe das Kapitel zu Ende gespielt, da wo ihr jetzt wart, da wo Indiana Jones gestorben ist. Und ja, und da bin ich jetzt mal gespannt am Dienstag, wenn es dann
Hast du jetzt
weitergeht.
gerade was gespoilert?
Nein,
Nee,
Achso, okay. Klang jetzt etwas verstört.
das Easter Egg haben wir alle noch erwischt.
genau.
Ja, ja. Also bis dahin hat er ja gespielt und hat er abgebrochen. Also es war echt total lustig. Ich habe mich echt, ja, totgelacht.
Guck
Sieht
mal,
man
da
die
ist er
Weiher.
wieder.
Hallo.
Hast du dich
Hallo.
wieder beruhigt, ja?
Ja, ja, ich konnte nicht mal mehr pullern, so ekelhaft war das gerade.
Super.
Aber ich muss doch mal Werbung machen hier für Runaway. Also am Dienstag einschalten, weil das ist total ein geniales Spiel und das macht richtig, richtig Laune. Auch die Stimmung, Atmosphäre und Musik ist super, super toll. Und also ich freue mich da richtig drauf. Also ich hätte, glaube ich, nicht jedes Spiel im Urlaub weitergezockt. Was war da jetzt lustig dran?
Nein, Micha hat gegeben.
Bitte?
Das hat aber nichts mit dem Spiel zu tun.
Robin, los, ey.
Robin ist schon weg.
Was war jetzt? Ich hab's nicht mitbekommen. Was war denn
Ah.
los?
Hat der Blähung oder warum haut der immer ab?
Entschuldigung. Könnt ihr mal aufhören? Mann. Oh,
Hallo Oliver.
Hallo,
Immer ein
Oliver.
bisschen
Hallo,
Niveau.
Oliver.
Hallo.
das Niveau
Hallo.
kommt erst
Hallo.
Viertel nach 9. Bis dahin
Ja,
sind wir noch
bitte fang mal
flexibel.
das Niveau ein.
Welches Niveau.
Das läuft doch irgendwo rum.
Welches Niveau? Ingo, ich habe aber mal kurz eine Frage, weil
Ja?
ich hatte eben einen Anruf gehabt und als ich aufgelegt habe, habe ich nur im Stream gehört, dass ich dir irgendwie ein schlechtes Spiel empfohlen habe.
Genau, beziehungsweise ein Spiel, was mir jetzt dann doch nicht so zugesagt hatte. Ich hatte irgendwann mal gefragt nach einem geistigen Nachfolger von Afterburner. Und da hattest du dann mal irgendwie empfohlen, ich weiß nicht, Ace Combat, diese Reihe.
Empfohlen kann ich das kaum haben, weil ich habe Ace Combat selbst nicht gespielt. Ich wusste nur, dass Ace Combat irgendwie so
genau so
als-
ähnlich ist, genau. Und da habe ich mir das ja mal angeschaut, von Bildern habe ich es mir dann gekauft. Und da war ich dann halt dann nicht so zufrieden. Aber gut, es war jetzt keine so 100%ige Empfehlung. Aber ja, gut, das ist halt einfach aus dem Stammtisch entstanden und da probiert man ja halt mal was aus und manchmal gewinnt man, manchmal verliert man halt. Ja, das ist halt so.
Naja,
dass manchmal die Spiele
das
halt
Ace Combat
passen.
ist ziemlich gut angekommen damals in der Presse.
Ja, und ich werde damit nicht so richtig warm, aber ich muss es noch mal vielleicht länger als eine halbe Stunde spielen. Das ist halt, ja, das wäre zum Beispiel so ein Spiel gewesen, was ich im Game Pass erstmal angespielt hätte, bevor ich es mir halt dann gekauft hätte. Das ist halt, ja.
Ich finde
also
diese
ich fand's-
Konstellation ein bisschen eigen, obwohl ich das jetzt gerade auch selbst gemacht habe, sowas.
was?
Miriam, du bist doch da, ja, ne?
Du meinst jetzt was gekauft ohne Game Pass?
Nee, ich habe heute gesehen, dass die hier diesen einen Flipper da, diesen Demon's Tilt im Angebot hatten und der war ja damals im Game Pass drin für eine Weile. Und der hat mir sehr gefallen, nur ich wollte für das Ding irgendwie keine 20 Euro ausgeben.
Ach so, ja. Und das war ja noch vor meiner Game Pass-Zeit damals. Auf der PlayStation habe ich mir das ja gekauft, das Ace Combat. Das heißt, es ist schon ja ewig lange her. Also ich habe ja jetzt schon die Xbox seit fast einem Jahr. Ja, das ist Wahnsinn, wie die Zeit vergeht. Und ich glaube, ich habe seitdem die PlayStation fast gar nicht mehr benutzt. Eigentlich nur noch für ein Spiel, für Ghost of Tsushima. Ich wollte schon wieder sagen Fukushima. Aber gut, nee, Ghost of Tsushima. Und das war das einzige Spiel, was ich auf der PlayStation bis jetzt gespielt habe. Seitdem, ja.
Ja.
Einmal ganz kurz eine Frage an Miriam, wenn es noch da ist.
Ja, bin ich.
Du kriegst ja noch ein Steam-Key.
Ja.
Und mein Zufallsgenerator liegt hier auf 2 Spielen gleichzeitig, weil die hier falsch eingetragen sind. Du darfst dir eins von beiden aussuchen. Wir sind bei den Buchstaben P und R. Entweder bekommst du einen Paradise Killer oder Remothered Broken Porzellan. Was möchtest du haben?
Bitte was?
Entscheiden Sie sich jetzt. Paradise Killer oder Remothered Broken Porzellan? Oder Lane?
Remothered Broken Porzellan?
Ja, habe ich noch nie was von gehört, aber ich...
Ja, gib mir das mal.
Okay, dann geht das Porzellan an dich. Danke, mehr wollte ich gar nicht.
Zurückgemuttert.
Remothered ist, glaube ich, eine Horrorserie, ne?
Ja,
Ist an dich unterwegs.
perfektamente.
Bitteschön. Alles
Oh,
gut,
es hat
ja.
gebrummt.
Ja, manchmal brummt es hier.
Ja, super. Deswegen tritt wahrscheinlich Robin auch die ganze Zeit aus, weil es bei ihm auch brummt.
Nee, das hat nur gesirrt, nicht gebrummt.
Also das
Sicher?
Schöne ist, wenn wir nachher auf Englisch wechseln, dann sind die Zweideutigkeiten weg.
Ja,
Bist du sicher?
Glaube ich nicht.
nein. Was ich aber sagen muss, ich finde das lustig, dass nach einer halben Stunde es immer noch nicht irgendjemand geschafft hat, zu sagen, ich komme vorbei.
Also ich bin bald weg, ne? Also
Ja.
Ja,
auch nicht mehr so lange heute. Es war gestern schon so ewig lang und ich habe mich auch echt dumm und dusselig gelacht mit euch.
Warst du
Ich
jetzt so
konnte
bis zum Ende?
ich konnte überhaupt nicht einschlafen. Ich bin, glaube ich, so spät eingeschlafen und dann ziemlich früh auch wieder wach geworden. Also ich habe so ein bisschen die Tränensäcke auf 7:30 sitzen.
Warst du bis zum Ende dabei? Ich kann mich gar nicht mehr erinnern. Ich war
Nee.
irgendwie in einem Zustand, der halt irgendwo nicht mehr anwesend war.
Ich glaube, irgendwas nach 0 war es. Ich glaube, 12:30 oder so war
Ah
es.
je, nee, da haben wir noch viel länger gemacht. Ich glaube, bis
Ja,
2
siehste,
hat man noch.
ich
noch
konnte aber
nach
nicht
2.
mehr. Ich war schon durch.
Ich auch nicht mehr, aber das ist halt, das Schlimme ist ja, je länger es wird, desto interessanter wird's. Und das ist ja auch das Fiese beim Stammtisch, ja, weil ich
Ja,
weiß,
ja.
wenn ich da nicht halt irgendwann rechtzeitig abspringe, dann habe ich ein Problem. Dann komme ich am nächsten Tag nicht mehr raus. Ja,
Teils
wobei ich
sinkt das
muss,
Niveau auch immer tiefer, je später es wird, ja.
was gestehen. Ich hatte beim letzten Stammtisch, ja, weil ich habe ja eine neue Fernsehserie gesuchtet und ich bin dann auch ein bisschen früher rausgegangen und habe dann die Serie noch weiter geschaut. Und zwar dieses The Queen's Gambit Oder
Ja.
wie heißt es?
Queen's Gambit.
Queen's Gambit, genau. Das ist absolut eine geniale Serie. Also, die hat mich ja sowas von aufgesogen. Da habe ich dann noch eine Folge geguckt und also nach dem Stammtisch. Und dann am nächsten Morgen habe ich den Rest dann halt noch dann verschlungen. Also es ist eine ganz grandiose Serie und das ist definitiv eine Empfehlung. Also wer ein bisschen so Spaß an Schach hat, ja, der wird das lieben.
Der tut mir leid.
Warum?
Okay, wer Spaß an Schach hat, also ich verstehe, dass man Schach spielt, aber hat man dann Spaß dran?
Bestimmt, also das kann ich mir schon vorstellen. Also
gut.
hätte es die Computerei damals nicht gegeben, wäre ich wahrscheinlich auch in Schach gelandet. Also das kann ich mir gut vorstellen.
Kann
Du
gut
brauchst
sein.
aber halt verdammt viel Zeit halt für Schach. Ja, das ist halt auch kein so
Nein.
Spiel, wenn du es richtig spielst, ja, da musst du halt auch wirklich dann auch viel lesen und lernen und Strategien und Positionen können. Also das ist halt schon nicht ganz ohne.
Was du dich erinnerst, Ingo, es gab früher diese Diplome, die man machen konnte im Schach. Ich habe als Jugendlicher so Bauern, Damen und Königsdiplome gemacht und sowas. Ich habe das sehr gerne gespielt damals, aber das war wirklich, irgendwann wurde es dann auch zu viel. Aber das war schon schön.
Es gab ja auch eine ganze Computerzeitschriften namens immer Schachecken. Das war ja auch damals eigentlich so gang und gäbe. Das war halt irgendwie auch schon damals nerdig.
Es gab ja früher in einer Spielezeitung gab es ja doch immer diese Schachecke, ne? Wie hieß das
Ja.
bei
Bei ASM war das.
ASM?
Bei der
Ja,
ASM
ja.
war das doch.
Ja, geile Sache.
Und heute ist ja eigentlich Schach so mehr oder minder ausgestorben, habe ich das Gefühl. Also jetzt so bei der
Nein,
Jugend.
definitiv. Also wir haben in Hamburg immer noch das Spiel, das große Spiel östlich von der Alster gegen Westseite Alster. Rechts der Alster gegen links der Alster heißt das bei uns. Also die Stadt
Okay.
teilt sich dann auf in geografisch Alster rechts, links und die spielen dann halt ein großes Schachturnier mit 3.000 oder 4.000 Leute.
Aber ob die
Leuten.
Schachspieler heute noch so gut sind wie früher, also das kann ich mir nicht vorstellen, weil damals war das ja dann wirklich so ein Fulltime-Hobby und heute, also kann ich mir das nur noch schwer vorstellen, dass da jemand wirklich hundertprozentig nur Schach spielt.
Wird sich keiner mehr leisten können.
Wie meinst du das?
Ein Arbeitskollege von mir ist jetzt zum Beispiel im Schachverein eingetreten. Er spielt jetzt für den FC Bayern Schach.
Ja, und der Chat schreibt auch, Christian Harm schreibt, die Leute spielen besser als früher. Und der Lade 41, der hat auch nochmal angeführt, in der Pandemie hat Schach echt einen riesen Aufschwung bekommen. Und The Queen's Gambit hat sogar in den USA dazu gesorgt, dass es eine Knappheit an den Schachspielen gab. Das haben mir Freunde erzählt.
Das war aber auch eine tolle Serie. Also wir haben
Die
auch
super, die
geguckt
Serie.
und
Kann ich auch nur
Ich
empfehlen.
wusste nicht, aus wie vielen Winkeln man Schach filmen kann.
Ja, vor allem interessant.
Mit wie vielen Ideen man eine Schachpartie zeigen kann, dass selbst Leute, die keine Ahnung von Schach haben, wirklich keine Ahnung, das sich angucken können wie einen spannenden Film. Irre. Auch diese Projektion an die Decke und sowas. Tolle filmerische Ideen, war ganz, ganz hervorragend.
Vor allem, ich fand das Ganze eigentlich so gemacht wie ein Actionfilm. Also ich hatte das Gefühl, dass ich einen Actionfilm sehe. Also gut, das hört sich jetzt doof an, aber das war halt wirklich auch von dem Schnitt her auch so hochwertig gemacht. Also ganz toll. Vor allem, es war sowas von hochspannend. Ja, die haben eigentlich nicht viel gemacht da, aber es hat mich total gefesselt gehabt. Und ich hatte lange keine Serie mehr, die mich halt so geflasht hat.
Ingo, ist die Mail von mir angekommen mit dem Steam Key? Weil die habe ich auch nochmal zurückbekommen.
Warte mal, ich muss mal gerade gucken hier.
Fängt mit H an, das Spiel.
Warte mal. Hotshot Racing.
Genau, wunderbar. Alles sehr gut. Weil
Okay, super, danke.
Ich habe den Steam Key auch zugeschickt bekommen. Keine Ahnung warum.
Was? Pop?
Pop. Du hast ja diverse Sachen gekriegt.
Genau, aber das mit Chris Hülsberg war nicht mehr dabei dann. Oder war ich da zu spät? Und das war nicht in dem Chris Hülsberg drin.
Das kommt gleich nochmal, kein Problem.
Okay.
Ich bin hier
Super.
gerade am Sortieren. Ich bin jetzt gerade dabei.
Pop.
Pop.
Hört sich echt gut an. Hochwertig. Was ist denn Pesta Quest?
Ingo, stell doch keine Fragen. Ich weiß das doch nicht.
Einfach nicken und Danke sagen.
Sag
Danke.
Gibt es einen Steam ein und dann haben wir später was zu lachen. So was wie Russian
Ja,
Hentai
ich habe hier
rauskommt.
leider, ich bin ja hier unter Bootcamp auf PC und da habe ich kein Steam drauf.
So, jetzt müsste ich die Mails abgearbeitet haben, die hier erstmal relevant waren. So. Ja. Genau, live anspielen, dann haben alle was davon. Ich bin sowieso dafür, dass die Leute ihre Sachen, ihre besonderen Dinge live anspielen und uns das dann zuschicken. Ich kann ja schon mal sagen, wir werden im September keine Gala machen, aber mit Sicherheit einen Tag Ende September irgendwann, wo wir gerne wieder Videos der Retrokompottis oder der Zuschauer abspielen, weil das kam sehr, sehr gut an diesmal. Also da würde mich auch freuen, wenn zum Beispiel der Stefan da mit seinen kleinen Gameboy-Sachen weitermacht. Vielleicht hat Arne ja nochmal wieder Lust oder Miriam hat mal eine längere Session zum Aufnehmen, die ja schon öfter mal geplant war. Das wäre total cool. Also da machen wir irgendwas draus und am Ende werden wir dann wieder ein Live-Panel machen und mit Sicherheit auch wieder Retro-Bingo und solche Geschichten. Nicht als Gala in dem Sinne, aber als längeren Online-Stream, weil das wirklich, da kamen sehr viele Mails, die den gestrigen Tag so schön fanden. Das hat mich sehr gefreut. Also da kamen tolle Rückmeldungen. Auch die letzten Stunden wurden sehr gern gesehen.
Gurkengate, ja.
Das Gurkengate war nicht öffentlich. Noch einmal, ihr braucht nicht in Twitch rumzusuchen, das Gurkengate war nicht öffentlich.
Nee, das gab's leider nicht.
Das hat auch keiner aufgezeichnet, hoffe ich.
Sicher?
Muss noch einer klippen.
Kannst du nicht klippen, das gab's ja nicht.
Das war ja danach. Er hat sich ja
Ach so.
nicht getraut, in seine Gurke zu beißen. Das hat er erst nach dem Stream gemacht. Und das sah auch echt übelst aus. Also wirklich übelst.
Vielen Dank auch nochmal an Thomas, der uns auch noch eben was zukommen lassen hat. Vielen,
Ja,
vielen
ja,
Dank,
brauchst gar nicht
Thomas.
ablenken.
Danke nicht ab. Es gab kein Gurkengate. Was redet
Also,
ihr da eigentlich?
Solange jetzt hier keiner jetzt ein Waldmeister-Eis isst.
So, was ist denn da?
Alles, was grün ist, sieht komisch aus vom Greenscreen.
Ach so, ach so.
Deswegen habe ich auch nicht das Zelda-T-Shirt angezogen.
Dann hättest du Löcher
Das ist
wahrscheinlich.
so durchsichtig, ja.
So hast du sowieso schon einen grisseligen Streifen, Oliver.
Ein Grizzly-Streifen?
Ein
Ja,
Grizzly-Streifen.
das liegt an dem Regenbogenfarben vom Commodore.
Das Bild ist gespiegelt, ne? Kann das sein, das Kamerabild?
Ist es bei euch gespiegelt? Das
Ja.
sollte eigentlich so
Nein,
nicht
es ist
sein.
gespiegelt. Musst du einmal entweder in Zoom drehen oder in OBS. Eins von beiden war richtig, eins war falsch. Das
In
genau stimmt.
OBS dann. Moment.
Ja, ja. Im Augenblick steht da Erobamemok oder irgendwas.
Mock.
Aerobamok, was?
Ja.
Oh, geil. Das macht mich richtig scharf, Patrick. Aerobamok.
Ich lese nur Olivers T-Shirt vor.
Nee, das ist aber auch irgendwie so, weiß ich nicht. Ich hatte letztens ein Update hier von Streamlabs OBS und der hatte in einigen Szeneneinstellungen plötzlich die Webcam gespiegelt. Ich habe
So, bei Updates
Anscheinend noch
passieren die
nicht.
schönsten Sachen. Was auch lustig ist, wenn man spielen ja die Videos teilweise ab mit VLC-Plugin bei OBS und es funktioniert nicht mehr nach dem letzten VLC-Update. Da musst du eine alte Version installieren. Auch ganz toll, da muss erst drauf kommen.
Warum muss eigentlich die scheiß Timeline bei Instagram nur noch aus Essen bestehen, wenn ich Hunger habe? Wissen Sie das? Mein Zittern in der Hand oder so?
Mein Zittern in der Hand, das ist sehr
Ich würde mir Gedanken machen, wenn Lieferando-Werbung kommt.
Ja, vor allem, wenn die jetzt bei uns im Stream kommt, dann werden wir doch abgehört.
Oh.
Das wäre tatsächlich garstig. So, das ist schön. Ich könnte auch noch einen Robocop 2 holen, da hat er ja auch mitgemacht. Die Matthias-Kanone. Mal kurz gucken.
Ganz lang.
Dann werde ich auch müde.
Ja.
Oh, rotz dich frei, hab Spaß dabei.
Ach, wie schön, dass wir schon um diese Uhrzeit. Ja. Wie gesagt, falls der Chat noch Fragen hat, noch etwas erzählen möchte, gerne. Wir sind für alle
Ab 100 € gibt's Gurken.
Oh, hör bitte auf mit den Gurken jetzt. Es ist Feierabend, also ehrlich.
Nee, bei 100 € kannst du eine Gurke essen, bin ich dafür. Können ja auch alle zusammenlegen.
Aber erst nach Mitternacht esse ich eine Gurke vom Greenscreen. Und ich sage euch, es ist nicht schön, eine Gurke vom Greenscreen zu essen.
Es sah auch nicht so richtig appetitlich aus.
Aber
Ich
sie
wette, der ein
schmeckt
oder
gut.
andere hat sich schmerzhaft an den Schritt gefasst danach.
Das ist nicht witzig. Es ist gar nicht witzig.
Doch, es war mega witzig.
Nein,
Was?
witzig war tatsächlich, dass ich eine Stunde gesessen habe, diese Gurke angestarrt habe und dachte, ich würde gerne, aber ich kann nicht. Ich will nicht, dass es jemand sieht. Weil ihr wart gerade so doppeldeutig drauf.
Das war also der sehnsüchtige Blick, der immer irgendwie
Ja,
irritiert
genau.
hat.
Gurke.
Oder ich muss den Greenscreen besser kalibrieren, dass die Gurke ganz unsichtbar ist, weil dann kann ich sie entspannt essen.
Schaut bestimmt nicht ulkig aus. Wenn du die ganze Zeit mit der Faust so.
Ja,
Wo
diese
kommen dann
Bilder.
solche Sachen wie irgendwie so, Patrick, hast du gerade ein Loch im Kopf?
Das hatte ich doch den einen Tag, hatte ich doch bei der Weihnachtsfeier hatte ich doch das Weihnachts-T-Shirt an den Tannenbäumen. Das war auch wunderschön. Da hatte ich Tannenbaumlöcher.
Ich hatte ja auch mal, glaube ich, zur 2. oder 3. Videostammtisch-Folge ein grünes T-Shirt an.
Ich glaube, du warst bei uns in der Location mit einem grünen T-Shirt. und
Ja, das
wolltest
ist auch,
die-
aber gut, das war jetzt auch.
Du sahst einmal aus wie Rayman, das stimmt.
Genau.
Das war aber dann wirklich in Folge 2 oder 3. Also ganz früh. Das habe ich auch damals nicht bedacht mit dem Greenscreen.
Was heißt damals nicht bedacht? Das kann immer noch mal passieren, dass du irgendwo
Ja,
was findest,
vor allem, als ich ja in der Location war, da habe ich ja auch irgendwie nicht gedacht, dass ich dann vom Greenscreen stehe. Also,
Kommt auf den Greenscreen drauf an.
genau, und ich mag
Das
einfach
stimmt.
grün als Farbe.
Mit dem Atem kannst du auch Gurken essen und die verschwinden nicht.
Ja, aber das ist doch langweilig. Und,
Ja, und du hast mir davon
Ab 1
abgeraten.
Euro.
Danny, und du hast mal von dem Atem abgeraten und jetzt habe ich mir jetzt 3
Ist doch
Elgato
kein Gurken.
Capturing-Karten. Die ich
Das-
übrigens auch gleichzeitig betreiben kann. Also zumindest 2 gleichzeitig. Das ist kein Problem. Die 3. ist ja ein Einsatz bei meiner Tochter. Und das funktioniert wunderbar. Also die kann man auch parallel nutzen. Das geht.
Ich finde es immer schön, wenn keiner redet und der Blick so, wann sagt endlich einer was und das Bild schaltet mal wieder um. Jetzt bin ich der Idiot. Super.
Er ist selber schuld, wenn du redest.
Robin ist verschollen. Robin kommt nicht mehr wieder.
Robin sucht der Robocop 2.
Wer hat Robocop gewonnen? Ich weiß es nicht.
Ja.
Könnte jemand bitte sprechen? Ich möchte hier ein paar Sachen erledigen und ich möchte dabei.
Gurken essen?
Ja, ich kann vielleicht noch was reden, was ich gespielt habe. Und
Sehr
zwar, ich
gerne.
habe wieder ein interessantes Spiel im Game Pass gefunden, und zwar 12 Minutes. Ich weiß nicht, ob ihr von dem Spiel schon mal was gehört habt. Das ist ja so eine Art.
Ich habe es angetestet, aber nicht gespielt. Der Selma hat es, glaube ich, länger gespielt schon.
Ja, also ich habe das jetzt auch mal so eine Stunde gespielt. Und das Ganze ist ja eigentlich eher so ein Kammer-Detektivspiel. Und zwar geht es darum, man ist in so einem Time Loop gefangen, in einer Wohnung. Und da passiert ein Ereignis. Und es passiert dann wahrscheinlich, also nach diesen 12 Minuten, dass man halt stirbt. Und dann fängt es immer wieder von vorne an. Und man muss halt versuchen, diesen Fall aufzudecken. Und ich finde das echt ziemlich interessant gemacht, weil du musst halt versuchen, so in jedem Loop irgendwie Informationen weiterzugeben.
Täglich
Zum
grüßt das
Beispiel-
Murmeltier oder was ist so?
Ja, ja, du musst zum Beispiel deine Frau überzeugen, dass du in einer Zeitschleife gefangen bist. Und
Du
dann halt
sollst nicht
irgendwelche.
spoilern.
Du sollst nicht spoilern, genau.
Das ist ja jetzt, das ist jetzt schon direkt nach dem ersten Reboot wird das jetzt, das ist, also wenn du eine Viertelstunde spielst, dann bist du schon so weit. So, das ist jetzt zum Beispiel so der erste Schritt, dass du halt quasi deiner
Deswegen
Frau.
heißt das Spiel auch 12 Minuten.
Genau. Und ja, du musst dann zum Beispiel jetzt im ersten Schritt dann halt irgendwie deiner Frau versuchen zu beweisen, dass du halt in einer Zeitschleife gefangen bist, so dass sie dir halt glaubt,
Ingo.
dass, ja,
Ich glaube, wir
Bitte,
müssen
bitte
dich
darum, dass du
muten.
nicht zu viel spoilerst. Ich würde das Spiel gerne selber nochmal spielen.
es ist ja keine, da ist überhaupt nichts gespoilert. Das ist,
Ja, gleich ist er beim Ende, wetten.
ich habe es ja auch erst eine Stunde gespielt, also das ist ja.
Also
Ja,
er
gut, dann bin
spoilert
ich-
jetzt eine ganze
Eine
Stunde.
Stunde sind schon 5 vor 12 Minuten.
No.
Ja, also da ist jetzt wirklich nichts gespoilert, aber gut.
Okay. Ich hatte ja mal schon vor Ewigkeiten gefragt, wer von euch kennt diese Serie?
Kann man nicht mal entziffern, die Schrift.
Music Man?
Laserman?
Automan.
Aber das ist so der Typ,
Natürlich,
sich ein Auto verwandelt hat.
Unter anderem auch. Oder ein Flugzeug oder ein Motorrad.
Ja.
Ja, nicht. Ne? Das ist unglaublich. Das habe ich früher, das lief früher auf Sat 1 oder so. Und das scheint einfach, so sieht das in Blau aus, Automan.
Das ist eine Schriftart, die ist echt schon wieder der Hammer.
Ja, die ist Kacke im Quadrat und ich finde die Verpackung zu geil. Wo dann in die Verpackung mit einer Styroporhülle die Kassette reingequetscht wurde. Ich frage immer Leute, weil das ist so, für mich ist das Automan, das habe ich früher geguckt, lief, glaube ich, auf Sat 1. Niemand
Hast du schon
kennt
mal
das.
erzählt, da habe ich auch gefragt, da habe ich recherchiert und dachte, das wäre was für mich gewesen, aber ich habe es früher nicht
Ja.
mitbekommen.
Ich weiß auch nicht, was los ist.
Der Automan war für mich Hasselhoff.
Nee, den habe ich nicht so gern geguckt. Ich weiß gar nicht warum, weil ich dieses Auto so scheiße fand.
So, der Stefan kommt auch nochmal zu uns.
85.
Stefan hebt das Niveau
Das hoffen wir, wir versuchen was zumindest.
und lässt dann krachend fallen.
Wir bemühen uns ja. Stefan, ja, du hörst und siehst uns und bist jetzt auch dabei und hebst das Niveau, habe ich gehört.
Schönen guten Abend. Ich hebe das Niveau bestimmt nicht.
Nein, im Chat war es ja schon eben nicht sehr charmant.
Und soll ja nichts anderes, was auf dem Boden liegt.
Okay.
Stimmt. Frage ist, wie lang? Weniger als 10 Sekunden?
Naja, ab Viertel nach 9 voraussichtlich switchen wir ja auf Englisch.
Bereits seit mehreren Stunden.
Das stimmt.
Und da können wir ja dann nicht das Niveau wieder fallen lassen. Also wir erwarten tatsächlich noch Gäste. Beziehungsweise ein Gast hat definitiv gesagt, dass er Viertel nach 9 da ist. Mal gucken, ob das soweit klappt. Schöne Grüße auch an Thorsten im Chat. Dresden? Okay.
Ja, was soll denn in Dresden so schlimm sein?
Nein, umgezogen? Nein. In Dresden ist nicht schlimm, um Gottes Willen.
Nee, schönster
Frag
Bahnhof.
mal Ingo, wie Berlin ist.
Schönster Bahnhof in Deutschland.
Hey.
Ingo hat irgendwie ein Problem mit Berlin gehabt vor ein paar Tagen.
Was heißt Problem? Also, ich wusste ja, also ich war ja schon mal vorher in Berlin und ich wusste, was mich erwartet halt. Das ist jetzt.
Damit wird es jetzt nicht besser mit der Aussage.
Nee. Und das Problem ist halt, ja, für den Sommerurlaub ist halt Berlin etwas anders. Also, es ist halt ein Städtetrip. Und von der Kultur her war es ja auch ganz spannend.
Thorsten schreibt gerade im Chat, ist im Rad von Hamburg nach Dresden gefahren?
Ja,
Respekt.
da ist er bei mir vorbeigefahren. Das ist der Elbe-Radwanderweg.
Das sind schon ein paar Kilometer.
Das sind 500, 600. Da fährst du, also ich hatte mal bei uns, da der Radweg ja direkt bei uns vorbeifährt, an so einem Haus in Ochsenwerder, habe ich einmal da Leute gefragt, wenn ich dann halt so einen sächsischen Akzent gehört habe ich gefragt, die dann halt kamen nach Hamburg. Und die haben gesagt, ja, das war alles super, das war ein toller Fahrradweg. Es gibt eine Stelle, die ist total scheiße, nämlich da, wo man in Beutzenburg an der Elbe direkt lang auf dem Deich sozusagen fährt. Und das ist so eine Strecke von 15 Kilometer und die hatten volle Kanne Gegenwind. Und die haben gesagt, sie haben fast 2 Tage gebraucht für irgendwie 20 Kilometer, weil sie nachher nur noch schieben konnten. Weil das so viel von vorne war. Du konntest nicht Fahrrad fahren. Sobald du aufgestiegen hast, hast du sozusagen gegen den Wind gekämpft. Aber sonst ist das ein toller Trip.
640 Kilometer, schreibt Thorsten. Oder?
Ja.
Das ist eine Menge, ja.
Alter Schwede.
Respekt, wie gesagt, bei schönem Wetter ist das ein Traum. Es muss eine wunderschöne Strecke sein. Das ist ja, sobald du aus Hamburg rausfährst aus dem zentralen Hamburg, ab da ist es ja nur noch grün. Muss wirklich toll sein. Ich versuche gerade was rauszufinden, weil ein Gewinner von eben gerade möchte gerne ein anderes Spiel noch haben, was wir mal gezeigt haben. Und da suche ich gerade, wo das ist.
Ich übertrage die Sachen irgendwann heute Abend und morgen früh in die Liste zum Rausschicken. Das fertig machen. Gestern habe ich schon abgearbeitet, komplett. Das ist schon online bei uns. Schon 11 Tage reine Radfahrt. Wow, das ist lange.
Respekt, ja.
Fährst du auch wieder zurück mit dem Rad? Nein, dann ist es die Bahn. Oder wie machst du das dann?
Ich würde sagen, das ist ein One-Way-Ticket. Das würde ich nicht.
Bist du eingefroren, Robin? Nein.
Weiß nicht, nein.
Ja.
Ich sehe manchmal so kalt aus, ne? So tot mit dieser Oberbeleuchtung. Das ist wie mein Vater, verdammter Mist.
Oh Gott, jetzt geht das schon wieder los.
Ja, es ist furchtbar. Ich habe früher darüber lustig gemacht, dass Leute irgendwann aussehen wie ihre Eltern.
Tja. Wann ist jeder mal dran?
Du hast ja gestern auch Fotos gezeigt, wie du aussehen wirst, Miriam.
Ja, aber eigentlich sehe ich meiner Mutter sehr ähnlich, aber diese Reface-App, da sah ich irgendwie ganz anders aus. Keine Ahnung.
Ansonsten machst du wieder Schweineöhrchen rein, dann freuen sich alle.
Ja, super, danke. Schweine im Weltall. Hatten wir nicht mal so ein Schweinespiel? Ach ja, stimmt, hatten wir ja gerade erst.
Ja, das von gestern, was der Robin de Michael schicken wollte. Das mit den Schweinen, wo man abschießen konnte. Oder ich weiß nicht, wie hieß das?
Ja, wir hatten doch Schweine im Weltall von Mastertronic.
Jägermeister XXL oder Meisterjäger. Meisterjäger.
Ja, Meisterjäger.
Ja, das meine ich ja gar nicht. Meisterjäger. Oh Gott.
Ja, aber
Es
Jägermeister
gibt
durfte
aber
ja
ein
nehmen.
schönes Spiel mit Schweinen, das Psychopix UXB.
Ich dachte, Frontschweine kommt jetzt.
Nee, das hatten wir übrigens auch schon im Retrokompott schon ein paar Mal gehabt. Das war das hier, dieses Völkerball mit Bomben, wo man Bomben auf irgendwelche Schweine, sich gegenseitig Schweine in die Luft jagen und in Bonusleveln sich an irgendwelchen Blüten abknutschen.
Ich bin auch verstört wegen des Jeff Minter-Spiels vorhin von Mastertronic. Dieses
Das war übel,
zweite Mutant Camels Spiel. Das war ja auch echt total gaga. Was da
Also
alles
das-
rumflog.
Bärende Dromedar war echt der Burner.
Mit den Unterhosen und Kühlschränken. Also sowas bescheuert ist. Und vor allem, da fehlten ja noch 50 Level. Ich will nicht wissen, was da noch für Sprites kommen.
Könnte man ja herausfinden.
So diverse Sachen aus dem Haushalt, wie es scheint, ne?
Hast du das mal länger gespielt, Oliver? Ich meine, du willst ja irgendwann der Jeff Minter-Experte werden.
Nee, das Mutant Camels habe ich, meine ich, nur den ersten Teil länger
Den habe ich
gespielt.
auch gespielt. Der zweite scheint ja noch viel bekloppter zu sein.
Naja,
Peter Noster hat noch ein
Das-
Schweinespiel gefunden. Die 3 kleinen Schweinchen mit dem Wolf auf dem VCS. Das haben wir auch mal gespielt, der Location, wo man dann diese Steine sammeln muss und man die richtigen Stellen fallen lässt. Das war sogar recht
Stimmt,
gut.
aber das ist ja nicht schlecht.
Das war wirklich recht gut, ja. Ich weiß jetzt den Namen schon wieder nicht mehr natürlich, aber war so eine Hommage an die
War das
3
ein
kleinen
Quellenspiel?
Schweine.
Bitte was? Nee, das hieß eben nicht genau so. Ich weiß jetzt den Titel am nicht.
Oder irgendein Quellenspiel, oder?
Kann sehr gut sein, ja. Da war es auch wieder geklaut wahrscheinlich, aber ich weiß es nicht. War wirklich ganz nett, ja. Aber ich bin wirklich gespannt, wenn ihr irgendwann das Thema da mit Jeff Minter macht. Der hat ja nur so irre Sachen gemacht, wie man das sinnvoll analysieren und besprechen kann. Da bin ich total gespannt drauf.
Wobei ich jetzt fand, dass die Spiele auf dem VC20 von Jeff Minter eigentlich immer deutlich überdurchschnittlich waren. Also der Mann
aber
hat
das
es
Teil, was du
verstanden.
da, also ganz ehrlich, Ingo, das Teil, was du da hattest mit links, rechts, oben schießen, das war okay, aber nicht überdurchschnittlich. Wobei für den VC20
Es war überdurchschnittlich von den Spielen, die ich
Also
getestet hatte an dem Tag.
Jeff Minter war auf dem VC20 seiner Zeit weit voraus.
Bei ganz vielen
Wirklich
Spielen, Oliver, aber
weit.
ich sage jetzt nur, den einen Titel, den Ingo da gestern hatte, den fand ich nicht ganz so stark. Die anderen
Das war aber
Ja,
technisch
er
gut.
hat ja relativ viel gemacht in der Stelle. Das war im Prinzip so ein, was ich da gestern gesehen habe, das wirkte irgendwie so wie eine Abwandlung von dem Spiel Atlantis vom VCS. Das passt schon in die Zeit.
Es war halt einfach, aber es wurde technisch, fand ich, sehr gut umgesetzt. Also das war, ja, also grafisch und soundtechnisch echt für die damalige Zeit, für 82, fand ich das durchaus gelungen.
Also was ich halt bei Jeff Minter halt finde, ist, dass in der Zeit so kurz nach dem C64, da war so eine Phase, oder eigentlich schon während des C64, wo er halt sehr experimentell wurde. Und eigentlich mit Tempest 2000 ging das so los, dass man richtig gemerkt hat, so er fokussiert sich total auf klassisches Arcade-Gameplay und perfektioniert das auch im Lauf der Jahre. Trotz oder wegen der Präsentation mit den vielen Tieren.
Ich möchte auf jeden Fall auch nochmal auf das Polybius sprechen. Oh, wir kriegen Besuch und zwar noch nicht von dem Musiker, sondern von Lucasfilm, Arzt. Cool.
Ab hier Englisch.
Ab hier bitte Englisch, genau. Noah Falstein lockt sich gerade ein. Okay, now we have another guest here, Noah Falstein, a game designer and producer from the early days of video game industry. One of the first employees at Lucasfilm Games. He worked on Sinister, Indiana Jones, and other games. Hope you can hear and see us. Hi, welcome, Noah.
Thank you very much.
Nice
Glad
to
to
see
be
you
here.
again. Hi. Yeah, if someone from our viewers questions, please write the questions into the chat and we will try to give them to Noah. And our panel is full of co-hosts, and if someone of you wants to talk with him, no problem, please ask the questions.
Hi Noah, it's been a time since you've been here at the Retrokompott, and I did some things to check out what you had done programmed, and I'd see that you were the lead programmer and designer of Strike Fleet. Do you remember that game?
Of course. Yeah, I was very fond of that one. Not very well known.
No, but I'm always interested in people writing games about modern wartime technology. And how do you come to the conclusion that it would be a good choice to do something with modern war games in computer games, war machines like a ship?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was actually, Strike Fleet was the sequel to PHM Pegasus that I also was the project leader on. And that particular one, PHM Pegasus, my boss, Steve Arnold, who was running Lucasfilm Games, came to me, and this would have been about, I think, 1986, and said, you know, the division making games for George Lucas had really been founded to just make wonderful games and not really worry about being profitable, because the movie business, one of the people in the marketing group told me at one point, I made some comment about how I thought the games group was starting to be a little bit more of an earner for them. And he chuckled a little bit, and I said, you know, we did pretty well last year. He says, well, for you, you know, you guys, I think we tripled our sales. And he said, but we made more money from just licensing Star Wars pajamas than from all the games that you did.
So you're just something like, we have a division with computer games. It's just having you is the thing. It wasn't making money with you.
Well, it wasn't at first, but Steve came to me with PHM Pegasus, or at that time, and said, can you come up with something? You know, I was starting on a new game, and he said, can you really try and focus on what might be profitable for us, because we'd like to increase our revenue, at least be breaking even. And at that point, those types of games were extremely popular. Sid Meier had just started to come out with several flight simulator games. F-15 Strike Eagle, I think, came out around then. And there were helicopter simulators and various
Gunship,
different types. Exactly. And I went to the library we had at Skywalker Ranch and started looking through the books there to look for inspiration. And there was a book about hydrofoils and hovercrafts. And that struck me as, you know, just futuristic enough, and yet, you know, an actual real piece of military hardware to sort of fit in with what it was that we like to do. So that was our first venture, and it was, in fact, the most profitable game we had up to that point. So Steve said, can we do a sequel? And also PHM Pegasus and Strike Fleet were the only two games that we released through Electronic Arts.
Yeah. So
I was getting to know the people there as well. And so that was really what was behind it. You know, also, sadly, then as now, this type of military thing is in the news all the time. And you know, just following the recent drone strikes in Afghanistan and looking into that technology as well. And you know, I've always felt that doing military simulations, if you do them well, it's not a way of glorifying war. It tends to be more a way of educating people about the realism of it and just how destructive it can be. But you know, it certainly was a strong interest of mine. And to call it modern is a little unfortunately out of date now, because
of course.
I realize I know everything about the kind of military weapons that were being used from, you know, sort of 1970s into 1980s, and have become, you know, completely out of touch on what the new stuff is.
I was always a big fan of playing Harpoon from 360 games, and I was the mad guy playing something like Excel with no graphics at all, only shown in some types of library where you can have a look at what the ships or the planes or the submarines do have as sensors. And so normally I tend to love those games, but all the people around me tend to think I'm a bit creepy because I play something without graphics. And when you told me that I see the Pegasus in your shelf, in the bookshelf behind you,
Right.
I remember the story about I think this was the fastest ship on Earth, I think. So because of these hydrofoils underneath the ship, but it tends to be the most fuel burning thing on Earth you can actually build. Yeah, and it only has a range of 500 nautical miles or so, and only uses subsonic missiles, which is nowadays a bit slow and old, but in that year it was, of course, modern technology. Yeah, and
There were a lot of questions. The chat,
oh,
Robin.
then take the
okay.
chat.
Palmiga asked, who developed the story for Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, and why wasn't it made into a movie? And if Luke personally have a hand in it?
Well, the story was a collaboration between Hal Barwood and myself. We were the co-writers and co-designers on it. And I have to credit Hal for the majority of the storytelling because he came from the film industry. Aside from movies like Dragon Slayer and what was the first one that he did with Spielberg? I'm forgetting the name of it. One of Spielberg's very earliest movies he had co-written. He was also the ghostwriter for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So he's a great screenwriter, and we collaborated to try and figure out how to combine his screenwriting talents and my game talents and educate each other. And that's where it came about. As far as the movie question, it comes up a lot, but the reality is, of course, that the George and Stephen, working on Indiana Jones movies, they have plenty of their own ideas. I got to work with both of them on The Dig in the early days of The Dig. And one of the highlights of my career was leading brainstorming meetings that had, Lucas and Spielberg as participants. But they were just like us in the sense of having all sorts of great ideas. And not surprisingly, their ideas for movies were much better than our ideas for movies. And even though I'm fond of the story and, Hal's cinematic input, I think would have made it into a great movie. Even a lot of the dialogue works really well for a film and the voice version. But sadly, a lot of people keep speculating it may get made into a movie sometime. And unless it's a purely fan-based endeavor, I don't think that's very likely.
There's another question from Christian in the chat. He asked if you had a games library on the Sky Ranger Ranch, and are there any photos from back then? And he said other game developers had to buy games from other companies by themselves.
Well, we did have a game library, and I think most of the game companies, even back in the early 80s, were starting to accumulate a lot of games that, our competitors were making. It's been a running joke, I think, in the industry in general, that one of the best things you can do in one company to make sure you succeed is make a game that's so much fun that all your competitors end up spending a month of time playing your game instead of working on theirs. Certainly, I had a few. I remember playing Ultima 4 before we even moved to Skywalker Ranch back in would have been 1985 or so, and just being totally hooked and playing that way all through to the end. But the library I mentioned, where I got the inspiration for Pegasus, is a film library primarily, and mostly a visual library. So it's lots of books that were picture books. And any of you who played Maniac Mansion would instantly recognize it, because several of the main house at Skywalker Ranch, including our library, has a spiral staircase that was really lovely that Gary Winnick captured in the library in Maniac Mansion. And it was that room in particular, that library, was the most beautiful, amazing setting I've ever had the pleasure to work in. It's hard to imagine it is a working office, essentially, but it had a huge stained glass dome that had been custom made. It had this hand-carved spiral staircase out of a type of redwood that was only accessible because they were able to use old bridges that had been dismantled and had first growth redwood that you can't cut down now, but they were using it in a recycled manner. There was a Maxfield Parrish original piece of artwork over the marble fireplace. The fires, they had fires running all through the winter, and it was just an amazing place to be. It was by far the most beautiful setting I can imagine.
And did George come by from time to time and look at the development of the games, or even to play them? It's a question from Lada 41.
He was not actually, still to this day, is not much of a game player. Steven Spielberg is one of us. He loves games. He's spent many hours. There were times when I worked with him at DreamWorks Interactive later, where I know he was spending about 6 hours a day just playing video games. That was after he had done Schindler's List and kind of needed to recuperate from the intensity of that. But George was remarkable in having the vision to believe in what we were doing, even though he personally wasn't all that excited about it. And, as far as I know, to this day is not a game player in any particular way. As I mentioned with the Dig, when his friend Steven came in with his idea that wanted to be made into a game, that was by far, I think George spent more time working with us on the Dig in the first year that it was underway than in the 6 or 7 years I had been there before that in total for all the other games. And it was frustrating. We really would have liked more participation from him, but given that he was being so generous in funding us and putting us in such a wonderful environment, we certainly, it was up to him to do it however he wanted, and we were very happy to do the best we could to make him happy with the work we were doing.
Are there any questions from the panel? Please do not hesitate to ask.
Yes, I've got a question. I saw on Movie Games that you was a goofy pun consultant for Monkey Island 2. What is a goofy pun consultant doing?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of notorious, certainly with anybody I work with, for just loving puns so much, and like many people who do, my wife has realized that it's kind of a mental disorder in my part, and it's not something I have any control over, so she puts up with it. But I would be making puns, obviously with those comedy games, there are lots of great jokes, and Ron and Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman all were great joke writers and figured out wonderful ways to make those games fun. But I was coming up with puns. I'm proud of the fact that the original inspiration for the insult sword fighting in the Monkey Island series came out of a suggestion from me out of desperation, actually, because we needed to come up with something different than Ron's original plan. But the puns, I think, were in, I put them into so many places. I know that in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, we had a library, and there were a few jokes and puns there, and I think that there were some in the library in Maniac Mansion. Or maybe it was actually, maybe that's the thing, maybe it was not Maniac Mansion, but it's been a long time. But Monkey Island 2, I think, was that the one where there was a library in Governor Fat's mansion, whatever. I made lots of puns during the progress of our brainstorming sessions, and perhaps to my embarrassment, that was what I was most remembered for. But I am actually extremely proud of that credit on Moby Games. It's certainly one of my most original ones.
I have two questions. First one is about Sinistar. Sinistar is, as far as I know, one of the first games who established a video game boss. Was there an inspiration for this? And the other question is about Coronis Rift. I always wondered where do you get the idea for this game? Otherwise, there were a couple of games of Lucasfilm that used this fractal-based graphics. Where did the inspiration came from?
Sure. Well, with Sinistar, the credit for Sinistar as a boss monster goes to John Newcomer, who had the original concept. He was calling the game Juggernaut, but it sort of stalled out while he was working on it. They ran into some problems, and John was trained as an artist, had no programming skills, so it was helpful when I came to Williams that I took over and collaborated a bit with John and built a team of some great people. RJ Michael, I think, will be familiar to a lot of you. He wrote the original operating system for the Amiga computer, and I know he's been out to Germany to talk a number of times about that. And I hired him as our special effects programmer for Sinistar. But yeah, Sinistar as a boss, it wasn't the first a speaking character in a video game. but it was an early one, and it was certainly the earliest character that used voice to show its his evilness and his it really scared a lot of people when Sinistar first comes on, and we got a voice actor doing these great "Beware, I live" sounds. I do miss some of the aspects of those early arcade game days, because there were things we could do then that we just have never been able to do since then. So that was that first question. The second one, Coronis Rift. Well, the idea, I was very inspired by seeing Rescue on Fractalus, as was Charlie Kellner, and he and I both were doing some of the second generation of games. He chose to do the Eidolon, I came up with Coronis Rift. And we both used that fractal engine, because in these days, looking back, it's hard to imagine, but it was just revolutionary at the time. Nobody else was doing a 3D landscape that was actually moving and in proper perspective. And granted, it was very blocky, low resolution, but on a 1 megahertz processor, 6502 processor, it was incredible to all of us that Lauren Carpenter, who had done the programming for the Fractal engine, had managed to do that. And it's been told, I know, by David Fox many times, but that was the same, he was the same genius really behind the Genesis effect in the Star Trek II movie, the Wrath of Khan movie. And it was kind of a challenge to him to see if this thing that he had done for full-scale cinema could be ported and run in real time on what was considered a toy computer at the time. So that's really the genesis of that.
I remember the scene with the Genesis planet. Yeah, okay, that's okay. That was the reason for picking one of these choices.
Yeah, and it was just, we really, we saw the potential for 3D and, a first-person view. And one of the things about Coronis that I regret is that in some ways it had many of the elements of a first-person shooter before Doom came along, that you're moving along, you are fighting enemies, you are picking up resources to make your weapons and defenses better as you go. And if I had just made it a little more personal, I think, or come up with something that was less complex in some ways and more direct, it might have been more of a trendsetter. But I did enjoy doing that, and it was fun having the freedom. It was one of the things I really appreciated about LucasArts, and certainly the early Lucasfilm Games days, is that we almost all had tremendous freedom to speculate and come up with any ideas we liked.
Money-wise, we have the version here in the Retro Spiele Museum, and this one is published by Activision.
We have some more questions from the chat. Intruder 1505. What are the chances for a remake or a special edition like Monkey Island 1 or 2 for Fate of Atlantis?
Well, that's a tough one. The circumstances for the special editions of the early Monkey Island games were that LucasArts this was before they were acquired by Disney. And for about 2.5 years, there was a president that actually believed in the old games and was bringing them back. But they went through presidents of that company every 2 to 3 years, like clockwork, right up from about the time I left the company. It seemed to be changing all the time. And unfortunately, each new one would want to do something different. So the next one didn't want to do anything like the previous one. Tim Schafer, with his influence, was able to get the rights to do some of the remakes of the games like Full Throttle that he had worked on. But Fate of Atlantis, at this point, it's in the hands of Disney, and Disney is very tough. I have had some promising talks with people at Disney about bringing back old games in new forms, and I'm not allowed, probably at pain of being hunted down by Mickey Mouse people with costumes with sniper rifles to steal something from a recent cartoon I saw. So I can't tell you about the details about that, but I'm not very optimistic, frankly, because they have so many different projects and so many distractions. And I would love to see that happen. I thought perhaps the new Indiana Jones movie would revive some of that, but that was originally supposed to be out and finished about 2 years ago, and it keeps getting delayed. So, you know, and most recently Harrison Ford had a pretty serious injury and was recovering from that. So I have no idea if Fate of Atlantis will ever get a update version. I think it would actually do pretty well if it did. It's of the games I've worked on, I get more comments about that, and it was even to this date the most successful in terms of units sold of all of our adventure games. And some of Tim's games, like Grim Fandango, I think were better reviewed and in many ways, you know, a richer game. But that combination of Indiana Jones as a character and the time that we did it and the 3 paths that worked really well meant that it really was, you know, very replayable and holds up reasonably well for at least for adventure games of that era when you replay it now. Let me just throw in one comment. I know not everybody was interested in PHM Pegasus and Strike Fleet. They were a fairly limited thing, but one of the benefits is that the Commodore 64 programmer for PHM Pegasus that had originally been done by me on the Atari 800, that was a guy named Larry Holland, and he came on to be a lead programmer on Strike Fleet and then did the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series that he's obviously better known for. Yes, and our World War II flight simulators, we did 3 of those together. And Larry and I worked together after LucasArts as well on a number of projects, including some actual military simulation games and simulators. So I have a lot of fond memories of that. I actually did better hiring people, I think, at LucasArts than any other contribution. I brought in Ron Gilbert for Coronis Rift. You know, Larry Holland did the PHM Pegasus, and of course, Ron in turn brought in Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman. And so I feel that just by coming to LucasArts, I did pretty well. But I have to give credit to David Fox, who's the one who was my contact for hiring me. And David is kind of the grandfather of the division that way. I think he had a lot of influence over our culture in that direction.
So he's always called Larry Holland and not Lawrence.
Yeah, he uses Lawrence for his formal credits and things, but yes, he goes by Larry to everybody that knows him.
Okay. Yeah. I found the Strike Fleet version in our museum, so I now have a chance to see it if it's good. But I'm sure it is good.
We welcome additionally in our round Matthew Cannon, a programmer and musician. He worked for Ocean Software, and many of our listeners will remember his pieces on the C64. Welcome to our panel if you can hear and see us. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi.
We're fine.
Questions for Matthew, please put them in the chat too, or write from the panel. If there are questions for Noah or for Matthew, please don't hesitate to ask again. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's good. No, I'd like to support you in any way I can. It's interesting what you're doing, and we've spoken before about a few things. I think we spoke about some of the Game Boy stuff I did, which was, I think, the last stuff I did for Ocean before I left in '92, I think it was. So yeah, it's good.
Since we are in a sort of a simulator meeting here, I found, I think, your first game. And,
right, yeah.
And it fits in a way to something like this, because it's mainly made in the same time period. And I remember playing both, but they're totally different. So, but you just made the music, and I do not remember the music since I had a PC and I played it in crappy VGA graphics. I didn't see it on Amiga.
It wasn't the fastest game. It wasn't the smoothest, was it? I remember the guys from DID who developed it.
Yeah.
I do remember quite a funny story, really. It was a Christmas break, so I'd taken some time off. And I was quite young when I was working at Ocean Software. I think I was about 18, 17 about the time I did F29. And I'd taken some time off over Christmas, and the developer had to rushed to my house and knocked me out of bed. I think it was the 2nd of January, and I was slightly hungover. And he said, "You've got to come back and you've got to finish off the music because it hadn't been done," and they were rushing it to try and get it out. So he ran down in his sports car, pulled them outside, and shot me back to Ocean to finish that quite quickly, because they'd done some work over Christmas 91, I think, or 90, and they just rushed out that release, and I hadn't finished the audio, so I had to go back on the 2nd of January, not feeling too well. I'd had a great Christmas and New Year, and I got back to Ocean. I had to finish it quite quickly. Yeah, so that's what I remember about that. I remember them coming to the office quite a lot, and the one complaint from our developers at Ocean was that it wasn't really running too smoothly on the Amiga. It was a bit jerky, I think. But the PC version was, I think, okay. It ran on my x86.
I just had a check, and it's both from 1989. So both Noah's
was it 89?
finest,
Right, okay.
yeah, both Noah's Falstein's The Finest Hour, where he did his part, and F29 Retaliator were both in the same year. And why in hell is simulation such a thing in 1989? I start remember 1990 was second Gulf War. Was this a thing?
Well, one of the reasons was that the controls of computers, joysticks and keyboards, and this is before mice became very popular, so that was how most of the gaming was done. It was hard to do a lot of games that had smooth movement, partly because of the limitations of the computers, but the kind of an airplane cockpit or a military cockpit with its buttons and sometimes a joystick on an airplane really resembled the controls you had on computers. And you're also often looking through a limited view of a screen or out of a viewport, that sort of thing. And at least I know when we talked about it, that was one of the reasons that they were sort of a natural for those early days, going all the way back to Microsoft Flight Simulator, which amazingly is still pretty much the same title, just been upgraded slightly since those early Apple II days.
I think the Amiga version and the ST version also had some speed problems with their finest hour. If you come closer to an enemy and like a bomber and you shoot in it and it's dropping its parts, it tends to become very sluggish.
One of my favorite stories about Steven Spielberg and our work with him was he loved those World War II flight simulators. And in fact, when I was working with him at DreamWorks, I remember seeing, to my pleasure, that there were 3 books on the desk in his home office. At the bottom was Schindler's List. The one above that was Jurassic Park. But on top of both of those, very well thumbed and with the cover already worn, was the manual for Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe. And clearly that had gotten a lot more use than those other 2 that he made the movies from. But he also came in one day and saw us running, I think it was actually their finest hour, on a PC. And he said, "Hey, this is, this looks a lot faster and better than it does on my computer at home. What's going on?" So we asked him what PC it was, and of course they were always upgrading the processors and which graphics cards and sound cards. And he said, "Just a moment," and he picked up his phone, called somebody, and said, "Could you tell this guy, exactly what the specs are on this computer?" So we talked to this person, and he, very knowledgeable about computers, gave him all the specs on this. And then Stephen had us hand him the phone back. And he says, "So you got all of that? Great. So could you set up one in my home office, one in the office at Amblin, and one out in the home at Long Island, and make sure they're all loaded with the current set of games that are on there now? And you can get that by next week." "Oh, great. That's just wonderful to hear." And we're all looking at him with our jaws dropping. And he looked at us and smiles and said, "Yeah, sometimes it's good to have money."
I love those 80s money stories.
Yeah. there was money going around the 80s. It was in certain people's pockets and not other people. Yeah.
Oddly, that's still the case today, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Very different world now. I think the big rush back then, it was always Easter and Christmas. Whenever we were releasing games, there was always a big push around those two holidays. Christmas holidays was a big thing. Ocean tried to bundle quite a lot of games into their C64 packs. They used to sell a Commodore 64 along with a few of their titles, and it was always a bit of pressure around Christmas. And back then, of course, we still used to write games for tape. So the duplication process was always funny, because the person who worked on the tape loaders would be under massive pressure to get that, get that loading time down to less than 3 minutes or something like that. So actually that person's name is Paul Hughes. He worked at Ocean Software, and he also wrote a lot of the audio drivers, music drivers that we use to do our work. And his website now is offering, he's got all the source code. He's published all the source code for the old music routines that we used to use, which is quite good to see. You can run that on an emulator and cross compile it to your 64 if you can still do it today if you want. Been tempted to try it, see if it still works.
Yeah, Matthew, one of the things I really appreciate is that, I'm sure you had the same experience, that somewhere around, the mid-1990s, a lot of the stuff we'd done in the 80s, you couldn't even run it anymore. That, if it was even on for a PC, the new PCs were so much faster. Often the games were not clocked properly, and they just wouldn't function, or music would run at this sort of high pitched because it was,
that's right. You couldn't clock it. There was one game, I think it was Whizball, which was released on PC. I remember taking it home to see how they'd done it for PC, and it was running far too quickly. I couldn't throttle it down to the right speed. So I didn't know how the heck to think about that one. But yeah, they were quite. I didn't really do that much work for the PC at Ocean. It wasn't until after that for Rage Software, they were doing some quite good titles for PC. Yeah, so the last few things that we did there really were on the Game Boy. And I actually quite liked the Game Boy. I thought it was quite a good thing. It was quite revolutionary, I think, wasn't it? There hadn't been a handheld video game console since those really basic games in the 80s, which were LCD controls. So I think it was a good thing. But the sound chip on the Game Boy wasn't the best, but we had some fun trying to get the most out of that. Yeah, it was a good one.
Question from the chat, sorry, for both of you. Do you still have your own games at home? Do you show them to your children, grandchildren? And do they understand the 80s and the games of that days?
Yeah, I don't have anything of mine here. I have a couple of boxes, I think. I was given a copy of Batman when I finished my work on that. I just remember going upstairs to the office and asking for a copy, which they gave. They said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I did the sound on it," and they're asking me all these questions, like, because I thought I'd be able to get a free copy just to see what would happen. But yeah, they gave me a copy of that. I've got the box down here somewhere, but I haven't got any other games knocking about here.
You talk of this box.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah.
He played it tomorrow in one stream in one panel. He played Batman completely with your music.
That's quite a tough thing to do, isn't it? It's not the easiest game, is it?
It's nice. I have it on C64 and Amiga. An Amiga in the Hollywood collection.
Okay, yeah. So what happened with that was the C64 version was the first thing I did when I started at Ocean Software. I was quite young, but Jonathan Dunn was another in-house audio person, and he transposed it to the Amiga. So he took all of my C64 data and rewrote it for the Amiga version. And I think he added one extra track to that as well of his own. And that's sometimes what used to happen. So Jonathan would work on a ZX Spectrum version of something, and then I would take the data and try to convert it to the 64. And sometimes it would happen the other way around, where John would take my data. And we used to do it quite a lot, swapping around bits of data. So, and trying to match it on another machine, which was interesting.
Oh, well, I have one question about the Batman games, because it was the first project you did for Ocean. And as far as I've seen, you are credited also for the other conversions like Amstrad or ZX Spectrum and ST and whatever. It's quite amazing, because all sounds quite good even now for chiptune quality, I'd say. What's your favorite system there? And was it how did you work on this? Did you use something like trackers like the people on the Amiga did, or did you do it by coding the music?
Yeah, so I think the very first project I worked on was the Spectrum version. So I'd have to say that's probably my favorite version of that, because it was I wrote it for the ZX Spectrum originally, and then had to convert it to the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 was my favorite machine for audio. I thought it had the best sound and was able to do much more than the Spectrum. The Spectrum had the AY chip, which was quite limited, but I still really enjoyed working on that version. It was the very first thing I'd ever done, so it was quite an enjoyable project. It was written using one of Paul Hughes's sound routines, which was basically an assembler program with blocks of data. So at the top of we had an Atari ST with a cross assembler. So you'd write it on the Atari ST, and down through the parallel port, I think it went to the Commodore 64. So you'd be typing the data into the Atari ST, you'd hit F2, and it would go across to the 64 and pop up on that side. And it was a question of just adjusting the sounds on one side and watching it cross-assemble to the 64 or Spectrum on the other side. So it was mostly assembly with either Z80 or 6502 assembler. With blocks of data, big blocks of tune data. So not so much tracker, more just coding really. So quite a lot of work.
But cool.
Yeah, it's good. I enjoyed it. Yeah,
Oh,
the Spectrum was quite good in some ways. The Spectrum was more fun to work on because it was quite a limited sound palette, and that was a good challenge to have as someone wanting to try and write certain types of music. I was a big fan of film music and also classical music, and trying to put my ideas into a Spectrum was very challenging, but I quite enjoyed it. To get it into 3 channels. So it was quite good fun. I think later, when I worked on Navy SEALs, the last thing I did for the Spectrum, we had the 128K Spectrum, and by then the developer John O'Brien had managed to find a way of getting drum samples into it. So the original ZX Spectrum version of Navy SEALs had a sampled drum track, and I thought it sounded really good for a Spectrum, so it had proper drum samples. And then just towards the end of development, he had to take all of that out because he'd run out of space. So he ran out of memory, and he had to strip the drums out, and I was left with just 3 channels. And I thought, oh, there's nothing you can do, if you wrote it that way. Because if you write music with a rhythm track, and then it's taken out, it will not sound great. But I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't rewrite it, so I just had to stick with it. Yeah.
Again, to the question of Christian, Noah, do you still have your own games at home?
Yeah, I actually, well, in my garage, I have boxes and boxes of games. At least, I think, probably not every game I've worked on, but most of them, and certainly most of our LucasArts titles, I have a lot of games. We would get some games for free, although I'm used to hear, sometimes you do have to bargain with the people in distribution because every game they give to an employee for free is lost revenue. But I have a lot of my colleagues' games, and my wife would sometimes be frustrated that I was spending money on these games that I then stuck in a box. And I've been showing her the prices on eBay and other online things. So if I do sell them, then eventually they will in fact prove worthwhile. But it is interesting to see how popular these games have become, and I'm do have half a mind to take some of my Lucasfilm stationery that I still have and write little affidavits about it and try and increase the value and put some of this out on the market. But at the moment they're sitting in the background. And that question actually about our children and grandchildren struck home for me because I have an unusual situation in that my daughter, of course, grew up with games all around her, and she likes video games, but was not a huge fan, at least of the ones that I was doing. A few that she played, and it was delightful for me to come home and see that she was playing one of my games on our household computer. But she's now grown up, and she and her husband have a grandchild who's just less than a year old. But we're very curious about her trajectory, our granddaughter, because my daughter married a man named James Lance. And James is actually a designer and programmer of games. He worked on some games for Clay, the folks that do Don't Starve. He worked on a game called Invisible Ink for them. And his father, my co-grandfather, is Frank Lance, who ran the games program at NYU and ran Zynga New York. You might have seen his Drop 7 game. That was one of the popular ones he did. So this granddaughter now has two grandfathers, a father, and Frank's wife are all working in the games industry. And we are hopeful that she will, without being pushed into it, show some talent for game design there. And so she's too young to have played any of the games I've worked on, but when she's the right age, I look forward to introducing her to some of those. My daughter, actually, my son-in-law introduced my daughter to Fate of Atlantis. My daughter had known about it, but hadn't played it. And I was very grateful to him that the two of them played it together just before they came out to visit us at Christmas one year. So it's nice to be able to work on these games and have your own kids go on and play them. It's certainly one of the things I never thought about when I was making the games, but I really enjoy it now.
One question from Carter 17 Red to Matthew. Which of his own game soundtracks does he like best, and which by other musicians, whether retro or current, and which of them do you find most successful?
Yeah, I think the soundtrack that I thought I worked best on was the last one I did for Ocean called Navy Seals. I think that worked out quite well. By the time I got to writing that, my work on the C64, I think I was getting used to the machine. I think I'd matured a bit, and I managed to get the right sound. So I was quite happy with that. That was the project that I was most happy with. There were so many musicians around that had made an impression on me as a young games player myself. A lot of the stuff that and people talk about Rob Hubbard as being a pioneer and an influencer in that area. I was really fond of Martin Galway's work. He was a predecessor of my Ocean Software, and I think he was. I think he'd managed to get the right sound on the Commodore 64. I think most of what he'd done, I thought I was really impressed with. And he was very good at pushing the machine to its limit. I did manage to find some of Martin's old source code for a soundtrack he did for the Rambo film. So my friend at Ocean at the time, Paul Hughes, he managed to find the old source code for the Rambo music. And it was really, really difficult to understand. Martin had written the code and the music in a very proprietary language, very hard to understand how he'd done it. But I was just so happy to have the old source code. I was absolutely over the moon, because I remember hearing that music as a 12 or 13-year-old kid, and being so impressed that he'd managed to get so much out of the Commodore 64. So then a few years later, for someone to give me the source code, back then you just didn't get source code that way. You know, there was, I think Rob Hubbard's music driver had been leaked several times. It'd been available on the CompuNet, you know, the what was like the World Wide Web back then. But Martin Galway's source code was never leaked. It seemed to be well looked after and protected. So once I was working for Ocean, for someone to give me that, I was very impressed with that. So I learned quite a lot from hearing his music. Also, there was some other interesting. I mean, you know, Noah's talking about his work with Activision. I remember there was a game by Activision that I bought when I was younger called Ball Blazer, and I just remember it making an impression on me in the audio. I can't remember why. I think it was using, I learned several years later, it was using an algorithm to
it was one of the first games that was algorithmically generated music.
There you go. Yeah.
And Peter Langston, he was the person who had done the music for that. He was actually the very first employee at Lucasfilm Games.
Right.
He went out to a number of his musician friends, and I don't think any of them were household words, but some of them were quite successful musicians, and had each of them do their own kind of jazz riffs on the theme to Ball Blazer, and then use those to code the way that I think it would improvise using different segments from the different people who had come up with it. So it wasn't strictly AI, but there was an AI component in sort of figuring out how to make it all fit together.
It was quite amazing. I remember it was like nothing else that had been produced on the 64 in terms of music. It was just so unusual. Later, when I started to study music and then get into jazz and jazz fusion, I think I would have appreciated it more when I was older. At the time, as a young lad, I just thought this music is so, but it fitted the game perfectly. It was so alien. It was absolutely perfect for the game. Actually, there were a few Activision titles that was Master of the Lamps an Activision game, or was that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So Master of the Lamps was another one that, as a young boy,
by Russell Liebig. As far as I know.
Yeah, I remember hearing the soundtracks to that and thinking it was nothing like what the British guys were doing. It was something really different again. And yeah, so titles like that, and back in the mid 80s, we didn't really know the names of the composers so much. In the UK, it was always either Rob Hubbard or Martin Galway or Fred Gray or Richard Joseph. But with the American titles, you couldn't always find the musician's name, you know. So it's a bit of a shame. But those are the things.
I have to say, musicians, I think, have gotten some of the short shrift, you know, some of the least recognition, and musicians and writers are kind of in a tie for who is most likely to be brought in at the very last moment, well after they should have been, to fix a major problem, because they realized that the amateurs actually couldn't write music or dialogue without some professional help.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Yeah,
there were some other questions in the chat. Petty Dreams had a question for both of you. Were there ever projects you didn't like working on, or would you like to have done something different or better in retrospect?
Well, I've certainly I don't actually often even admit that I worked on these games, but for about a year, I worked with a company called Digital Pictures that is most infamous for a game called Night Trap. That was the game that got the US Congress to impose a rating system here in the US. And I worked on a game called Corpse Killer. It was a zombie shooter game that it's actually not a bad name for a zombie game, but it is one of probably the worst games I've ever been involved with. And I'm just very grateful that one of the nice side effects is that when games are really bad, usually hardly anybody ever hears of them. So, and this was for the Sega CD system, which was also very obscure because you needed to have a Sega Genesis and then buy the CD expansion that would plug in. But it was one of the company did those FMV games where they had really poor quality video at very low frame rates, and but actual real actors and real audio soundtracks that way off of the CD. So thankfully that didn't quite catch on, but that's probably the game I would most wish I had never gotten involved with.
I struggled to work on any game for the Amiga. When the Amiga came along and we were expected to work with sample sounds, I really didn't enjoy that. I missed my I missed working on the more analog sounding machines like the 64. So the Amiga was a struggle for me. I didn't really like using the low sample rate sounds. The people expected to have, drum sounds on everything. I was not a huge user of that sound, really. I was always going for something that was a little bit more low key. Obviously on the 64 we could simulate that kind of sound and try and get those effects in there, which is okay, but on the Amiga it was very in your face. The sound was always, let's have some bass guitars and some drums, and I really didn't enjoy it. I just couldn't get it right. So it's one of the reasons why I moved away from working for Ocean, was that I just didn't enjoy the new machines that were coming along around 92, 93. So it's one of the reasons why I left, I think.
Devil Inside asked if the two would not be exciting again to get involved in a project. The platform at Retro is experiencing again, it's a hype. Would that be possible?
Well, I had a very small participation in Thimbleweed Park that Ron Gilbert did as a retro version of his games a few years ago. And I still talk to my friends. Actually, most of us who were at LucasArts in those early days have remained good friends and worked on multiple projects together, and I talk to them fairly frequently. David Fox in particular, he and I live close together and have just stayed friends for the last nearly 40 years now. But personally, I mean, I've kind of moved on. The main thing I'm doing these days is I'm very involved with games for health, games that are tied into medical treatment or training doctors or diagnosing illness. And it's a really rapidly growing field. It reminds me of the whole games industry back 40 years ago. And I like having a relatively small group of people who are experimenting with things that nobody's ever tried before. And frankly, particularly the mobile world right now is just not that much fun for me. There's too much dependence on the economics of it all and trying to wring every last penny out of people with in-app purchases. And it just, I don't know. I feel sometimes very out of place that way, but I'm grateful that the industry keeps finding new ways to go. So I'm not likely to do, I certainly have considered some retro games and wouldn't turn it down if the right kind of idea came up, but I'm not actively seeking that myself.
Yes, similar to myself, really. There are retro propositions around, but I've not really found anything that would take my interest fully. And I think I'd have to be very interested in the game to do some sound for it. There are one or two old friends of mine from the 64 and Spectrum days, such as Jim Bagley and Peter Clark and Fred Gray, who are involved in remix work. So I'm currently working on some remix music, which is fine. So we've done some orchestral remixes and other things like that. But as for the retro titles, I've not really seen anything that's really grabbed my attention enough to go fully into it. I would be interested. It'd be a fun thing to do. But yeah, it's not happened yet. There's still time. We'll see.
I do have a question for Noah. Two things. One thing is the statue you got from the Indiana Jones Fate of Atlantis behind you in the shelf from the Atlantan people. Where do you got these from? Is this handmade from a fan? And there's another thing I'd like to ask, perhaps. How in hell did you get a thank you in Game of Thrones?
You put the micro on, please. Noah, your micro is off.
There we go. I just say I'm disappointed in your lack of belief here. These were the Atlantean artifacts that we found that inspired the game, and we went on from there. I've run out of orichalcum, or I'd show them off to you. So, no, this was actually, it was done by a fan. It actually it has a tag on it, the Barnett College collector, and with details. I mean, this is really wonderfully detailed. The person who did this. And I love the faithfulness to the images we had in the game, and of this, of course, the necklace that Sophia ends up wearing to her distress. It was a Spanish fan, and these were available online about must have been almost 10 years ago. And I gather, and he handmade each one of them, and it was just all a labor of love. So I got a couple of them. Actually, I sent, bought some online and sent some to Hal Barwood as a thank you for working with him on that. And I don't think they've been, I could dig up his name somewhere, but I think probably there's still remnants of being able to track him down online if people are interested in getting him to see if he can make some new ones. But yeah, it was really nice to see that. It's an interesting case, as you look at retro gaming, that I've learned that fan contributions are one of the ways that people kind of measure how popular their games were. And another thing I've heard of from John Romero, who I know fairly well, that one of the ways you can kind of measure how popular your game is how many people come to you and show you the tattoos they got with characters or images from your game. And I only have 2 Sinistar tattoos that I know of to my credit. So sadly, I don't know. Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's one thing to say that you love the game. It's another thing to go through the permanent trouble of getting a tattoo. So I think that's probably the best signal that somebody was absolutely a fan.
And how did you get the thank you in Game of Thrones? That was the other question.
I'm not sure what that refers to. What Game of Thrones was this? A game
I did found on Moby Games that there's a badge with thanks, and there's a thanks with Game of Thrones with a thanks of you in the last seconds of the series.
Yeah, that particular game. Gosh, what was the connection there? I do a lot of consulting actually since 1980. What would it be? No, 1996. I've been mostly a freelancer, except for one 4-year stint. And as a consequence, I've worked with dozens of companies, on a couple hundred games probably. And I worked with the company. I'm not remembering the name, but the company that made that game. And I was on a different game, but I think I contributed some comments and ideas, and they were just very generously put me in there in the credits. But I should warn you with the Moby Games thing that there are a number of companies. Actually, Blizzard was very good at putting in credits. I think in Warcraft 2 in particular, they had like 100 people they gave special thanks to, and many of them were people who made games that they played while they were developing Warcraft 2. So I think Ron Gilbert is on that list, for example, but Moby Game doesn't distinguish, and a lot of people will ask Ron, so what did you do on Warcraft? And, aside from serve as diversion for some of the people late at night, I think that's about as far as it goes. So yeah, I actually have met George R.R. Martin a few times because he and I are both members of a science fiction writers group that I got into many years ago. And he's a wonderful guy. And I talked to him about one of his short stories called Sand Kings. I've just been itching to have that made as a video game. Peter Molyneux and I actually both bonded over that at one point because I noted to him that one of his games, what's the name of his game where you control the giant creature that has a little mind of its own?
Black and White.
Black and White, yes. I said, yeah, it reminds me of this story I read called Sand Kings, and he just lit up and said, you're the first person to have noticed that connection there. So I do have some connection to the writer of the Game of Thrones books, but that's about as far as it goes.
I have another question. You see that in the picture. I noticed a curiosity on the directive from the C64 by Batman. There's a file named NDSlay. What does it mean?
Okay, so yeah, what's happened there. I think the programmer for Batman was called Andrew Slay.
Oh,
but here the problem here is I don't know why the file is there. I think it's almost the largest one, isn't it? It's probably the
main game file.
Yeah. So it could be the main program. I think the others are the levels, maybe, or level 1 or something. But yeah, they've spelled his name wrong there, or he spelled his name incorrectly. To I think just to get his name on the files. Andy Slay. So his normal name is ANDY SLEIGH. So I think he's managed to squeeze his name in there in an incorrect way, but yeah.
It's a good trick. When I load NDSlay direct, the game loads. It's loading direct. Loads the game file. Yeah. I tested it.
My name and the other 3 people who are the core team are hidden in a Easter egg in Sinistar, but probably very similar thing at that time. We weren't given permission to put our names in there, and we snuck it in. And in fact, we were being very careful that one of the only way to get this particular Easter egg is to go through a really complicated series of button presses and things, and then put in 3 quarters. Normally at that point it was 1 quarter per gameplay, and we thought that if we ever got found out, our bosses couldn't be too angry because every time somebody looked at it, they were basically giving a tip to the operator of the machine at the time. But in fact, it was discovered by a fan years on, and it was at that point, of course, there was no controversy about it.
Is an Easter egg in a game always a thing that shows that the programmers or the guys who made the game had fun with it, or is it just someone said, I do only make a game when I can make an Easter egg in it?
Well, I think I'm not going to remember his name here. One of the guys that did one of the Atari VCS adventures, it actually was called Adventure. That was the game that really coined the term Easter egg. I think there might have been 1 or 2 before that had something similar, but usually it's the creator's name is in there, or initials at least. Sometimes, often, in fact, they'll put other hidden things in there, just unlockable characters. Another Easter egg I know of that I was involved with, just as a thank you, is when I was at DreamWorks Interactive, I worked on a game that was a World War II, I guess it's a theme that I've had, World War II game set in D-Day, and my boss at the time canceled my project, and years later, after I had left the company, revived it and refused to credit me on it. But the team who worked on it knew that I had worked on that. So in this game, and it's Medal of Honor, which went on to become a very popular series when Electronic Arts bought out DreamWorks Interactive. But in the original Medal of Honor on the original PlayStation, there are 2 unlockable characters, and one of them is Winston Churchill, and the other one is just called Noah, and it's got my face that they took from a company picture and stuck it on there. So those, Easter eggs are often, thank yous or tributes to people who were involved with the games.
The guy from Adventure was Warren Robinette, I think.
And I'm going to have to excuse myself. This has been great, but that apple I was eating before is all I've eaten today, and it's time for me to head off and have some lunch. But I want to thank everybody who's made this possible. I love the fact you do this. It's been 2 years since I was last at Gamescom, but hopefully at some point in the not too distant future, I can come back out again. I have my most recent client for Games for Health is actually a company located in Berlin, and we're already talking about at some point next year, when things loosen up, having me come out to Germany again. So hopefully I'll see some of you in person next year.
Of course, whenever you want to travel to Hamburg, to the north of Germany, to our little museum, you were invited to visit us, of course. You see some of the things in the background of Robin and in my background.
50% discount.
That's great. And I'll see if I can bring a contribution at the time if I make it out there.
That would be great, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Bye.
Noah.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
Good to meet you. Bye.
Any more questions to Matthew? The chat can ask too, of course.
Matthew, how often have you been in Germany?
Well, I've been in Germany twice. Once, I'm sorry to say, it was driving through. I had to drive through Germany. I didn't really stop. The second time was to visit my friend who lives in Frankfurt. So my friend of many, many years over here, he married a girl from Köln. And they are now settled in Frankfurt in a little place called Karl am Main near Frankfurt. So that, I've been a couple of times, and I would like to go back. I really had a good time over there. The people were extremely welcoming and friendly, and the food was good as well. I really enjoyed the food. My fiance is from the Czech Republic, and the food is somewhat similar. It's quite a lot of meats and things like that, and I'm spoiled.
Big dishes.
Yeah, I'm really spoiled. I have some amazing food, really. So one of the things we've talked about is going to see my friend John back in Frankfurt. So I will pop over to. You see, I have no idea how far away Hamburg is from Karl am Main. But it'd be nice to join that together and do a trip. So come over to Hamburg.
Hamburg is about 450 kilometers, but I always would pick the train because there's a direct connection, and that direction is normally fast as long as you get a train, because they're sometimes not coming.
Really?
Yeah.
I really enjoy train journeys.
Or an hour later.
All right, okay. No, we've had some good train journeys in Czech Republic, and I really enjoy the train. So we have talked about going over there to see them, because I've not seen John for a long time. Zabina is a very nice lady. She's one of the funniest people I've ever met, and she's apparently people from Köln, or from the north of Germany, are meant to have this very happy disposition, very happy and joking. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard people from Köln are meant to have this very nice disposition, and she is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. She's always laughing. I'd like to go over and see them, and come over to see what you're doing at the museum here, or at the centre. It looks good. So we do need to plan that when things settle down, when all of this because the COVID situation appears to be, getting better. So it'd be nice to get over there. Yeah, definitely.
Well, there was a question before mentioning the retro gaming scene. Did you ever see that or listen to some stuff that the demo scene or the homebrew C64 scene did the past years? Because especially in terms of music, it's a very, very creative and lively scene. It's quite interesting what happened there the last years. There are also some people from the old days which came back and doing this as a hobby, like Jeroen Tel is still doing stuff, or Jason Page.
Yeah, Jason Page and Jeroen Tel. Yes, I met Jeroen Tel a couple of years ago at a Rob Hubbard orchestral concert in England. And we had some good chats, because I remember Jeroen Tel coming to Ocean Software. We were both similar age. We were quite young. I remember him coming in about 1990 or thereabouts to do some work with us. And we must have exchanged all of 5 words. It was just, hello, how are you, nice to meet you. And that was it. Didn't see him then for 30 years, so we had a good chat. Yeah, he's very active. We've got a few others on the go. I'm not familiar with some of the chiptune stuff that's being done recently. I've heard it, but I've not met any of the creators. I think what they're doing is quite extraordinary, pushing the 64 to much higher level than we could do back in the 80s and 90s. So I'm really impressed with how it sounds. Unfortunately, I haven't met anyone from that scene yet. It sounds really, really good. But I'm more familiar with the people who are involved in the remix scene at the moment, because I'm working on a couple of things myself, and there's a project on the go at the moment to transpose Commodore 64 music to an orchestral performance, which is something I'm working on at the moment. So there'll be a couple of Batman things in there and a few other things. So I'm quite into the remix stuff. In the last year or so, I've started to get involved. But I agree that the demo scene is extraordinary, what they're doing. I'm just so impressed with what they've been able to do with the machine. If we thought we could do that years ago, we would be really, really happy. But we just didn't seem to have the memory to do it, to sit with the game as well. So yeah, it's impressive.
Matthew, I have a question. Are you still in the game industry?
No. Recently, I've been involved in the remix community, but for many years I left in 1995. So my last titles were for the Super Nintendo. I worked for Software Creations and briefly for Microprose, where I worked on the first Civilization game, actually. I'm still credited on that. I remember writing 2 pieces of music for Civilization, and I didn't like them. I didn't feel they were very good, but I'm still credited. So I can't even remember what they sound like. Honestly, it's so long ago.
For Amiga, or for which version?
I think it was the PC version. I remember working on,
Let's have a look. I get the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Besides, I did find this one just but it's the wrong version, because it's Mr. Tinman made the music.
Oh yeah. Was that Keith Tinman? Oh, I think I know why I was credited on that then. Let's have a look at it.
You only have about 20,000 games. No problem, you will find it.
And do you play modern games nowadays, or
Well,
you have nothing to do with games anymore?
I do like. I'm quite a fan of simulation. Really, that's. I tend to play quite a lot of simulator stuff. We were talking about the flight stuff earlier. I still have a flight yoke here. You know, controls.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to the right of me here, and yeah, I do quite like playing simulation stuff. I'm not really a massive gamer these days, but I do like to keep up. Yeah. So.
Oh, you see Robin in the background climbing up the walls.
Oh my god!
Oh, but he found something.
I did not hide it in the upper ceiling, but our MicroPro section is on the 10th shelf.
10th floor. No, 10th floor.
So let's have a look. So this is the manual, PC, but I think it's the same version as the Amiga. And we have design, quality, insurance, graphics, music. It only says Jeffrey L. Briggs.
Turn the microphone on, please, Matthew. Matthew, please turn the microphone on.
You're muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that I was credited to Civilization when I went for a job interview, and someone mentioned it, and I checked it online, and yeah, I'm on a website somewhere with because Jeffrey wrote the music down in London, and I had just a couple of extra tunes to do, and for some reason they went into the game and I was credited, but not on the manual. Oh, okay.
Because it's probably written before the game was finished. Perhaps.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's always the last minute thing, you know. But yeah, I'll try to find that. Because I was quite surprised that I was still credited on there, because I didn't think I was on it at all. But yeah, okay. Interesting.
Perhaps we have an Amiga version which is shown a bit later, and perhaps it's on there.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but I do remember seeing it, and I was quite surprised. Just completely forgot because when you work on the first version of a series, you don't think anything's going to happen. You know, you don't think it's going to become something. So I completely forgot about it, and yeah. So.
I will go down and check it if it's an Amiga version.
Yeah, go and check it. Will you let me know if there's anything in paper? Because I've never seen it.
Yeah, that's why I check it.
Yeah,
See
it's
you
weird.
soon.
I've only ever seen it on the on a website, and that really shocked me. Because yeah, so we'll try and find it. I remember meeting Sid Meier. Is it Sid Meier or Sid Meier?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I remember meeting him at an event at MicroPro. So when I left Ocean, I worked for MicroPros for just about a year, back in 1992. And what year was Civilization made, actually? I don't know.
I think Robin is lost in
1991, yeah. Yeah, it was around that time, wasn't it? I think it might have been the Amiga convert then. Yeah.
We will see. Robin is in our cellar now, I think, and I don't know.
It'd be good to find it.
It's not cleaned up downside. I don't know how long it takes.
Oh, it says here AMI. Does that mean Amiga?
Probably, yeah.
Ah, right. Okay, that's the one. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there he is.
I've got some really terrible pictures of me on here as well.
Well, this is the first release, I think.
Yeah.
So this could be the same manual as the other version. So this is Jeffrey L. Briggs in the first release. But I have a second release, like a budget version, which has acid. So it's an English cheaper version. Perhaps they've changed something. This is a reprinted manual. It's not the black one, it's the white one. Let's have a check here. No, there's no name. There are no names on it.
Oh dear. So it's only on the, if you go to the video game music preservation page, that's the only place where I think I'm credited then, which is weird, isn't it? I do remember working on it, but it was such a, I didn't really enjoy it at the time. So, oh yeah. Oh, actually, hold on a sec. I've actually found some music from it as well. Someone's actually downloaded the music. Oh, that's weird, isn't it?
You can put the link in the chat if you want.
Oh, I will. I'll share it with you now. Check this. This is the first time I've ever seen
And
this.
they have
as well.
to print all the manuals, of course.
Yeah.
This one said music is made by Andrew Parton and John Broomhall.
Yes. So those are the guys that worked. Yeah. There you go. Check that one. So what's this then? Weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's funny that the Amiga version.
There's opening intro Matthew Cannon. Yeah.
I can't remember. I can't remember doing it.
I put
so
it
long ago.
In our chat too. Yeah.
So what would have happened there? I think maybe Mr. Broomhall and Parton, they were good guys actually. They worked in the same room together as well, which was quite. I don't know how you can work together as musicians in the same room. They both had headphones on either side of the room, and I think what happened there, maybe they took some of my music and converted it to the Amiga. I've never heard it. I've never heard it. So I'm going to try and download it and play it. Okay, so you can actually download this. Wow, that's a long time ago. Okay, let's have a look at this. Oh, I've managed to find an intro. Right, I found. Right. I've managed to find a YouTube video with that music playing. With weirdly, it's got Andrew Parton, John Broomhall, and Matthew Cannon on it. Check that. This is the first time I've seen it ever. I've never seen it before, and I can't even remember writing it. So there you go. That was a long time ago. That's it, yeah. So that's that YouTube video. Yeah, that's it. The first time in how many years now?
I still remember every music of it because I played it like a madman in '91 and
really.
Wow. I got the game on the 23rd of December and played it until the 5th or 6th of January through, just with some pauses for sleeping and eating. That's the only.
Did you follow the whole series of Civilization? Did you then buy all the titles?
Yeah, I'm one of these idiots buying every Civilization game since 30 years.
Awesome. Well, there you go.
And in the museum, we have the 10th floor, as I mentioned, or Patrick mentioned, is full of all the Civilization games. We have a shrine of Microprose games here.
Oh, awesome! That's
so
really
we are in love. I'm in love with Microprose. Although I didn't play all the games, and some were too terrible, boring, like B17, which is horrible for as a viewer of a player, but interesting.
Did you not like that? Yeah.
Yeah, but
I thought B17 was. I think I played a PC version. It was quite good. I can't remember now.
Yeah, the newer one, Mighty 8, or the old one, which is.
There was an old one. I remember being impressed with the. I remember it was B17 something, but I remember when I was younger, I was really into flight simulators. I remember trying to play Microsoft Flight Simulator on the Commodore 64, I recall, or was it the Atari ST? But it was just monochrome graphics, you know. And B-17, I remember playing that and being impressed with it, but I can't remember which one it was. I just remember it was really good. I think it was PC. I think it was PC.
The first version had the same engine as F-19 and F-117A. So it's very, it doesn't have any filled textures. It wasn't, and the newer one also had textures and looks a bit like secret weapons of the Luftwaffe in certain ways.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember there was a really old Commodore 64 game where you had to. Do you remember the game where you opened the bomb bay doors and you had to get the lights to line up?
Yeah.
What was that game? That was quite good on the 64 because most flight simulators didn't really work. I think that was the what was it called? You know, the bouncing bomb game, the bouncing bomb, the dam busters. Dam buster. Yeah. That was quite good because you had to.
As a German, we don't like hearing something like a dam buster.
You know. and we invented the bouncing bomb, didn't we? Barnes Wallace invented the bomb. Sorry about that. Yeah, the dam busters was. It was a good title. That I thought it was really good. But I was always frustrated as a Commodore owner, wanting to. Actually, I'll show you mine. Look, I've still got my flight yoke here. A flight yoke, you see, pride of place.
Oh, and
a flight yoke.
Perfect.
No, I still play flight simulators today, but I remember as a Commodore owner, I was really frustrated because you could never get that smooth, you know, the smooth graphics for flight simulation. So it wasn't until years later when I got a PC, and I've been quite addicted to flying for many years now. Yeah.
And the guys from DID, they were quite good with simulations. So this
one wasn't too bad. Yeah, they weren't too bad. What was his name? Was it Kevin? One of them.
Patrick?
I think it was one of his names. Kevin was Kevin.
Did we have in an interview? we had so many.
150 interviews in the last 5 years. Don't ask me that question at that time, please.
I should have a look. Let's have a look at what DID's digital image design.
Yeah, let's see. Here we go. Oh, it's Philip Alsop. No, it's Martin Kenwright. I remember it's like Kevin, but it's Kenwright. Yeah. Okay. They were good guys, actually. I used to really get on with them. They were nice people. Oh, right. Martin Kenwright. What's he doing? Oh, yes, I remember Martin. I've just looked at his picture on Wikipedia. I remember Martin. It wasn't Martin that picked me up from my house. It was Philip Alsop. Yeah. What's he doing now?
It says 2007 he was the CEO of Evolution Studios, but this is 14 years ago.
Wow, where did that time go? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, so he's sort of still involved.
Was the last game from DID. So there's another Epic and Inferno remake from Pico Interactive. No, digital. No,
Okay.
DID is still active or what? No, can't be.
No, it looks like it might have gone.
The last one, 2002, Eurofighter Typhoon Operation Icebreaker.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always not so funny to see how old from one side how old I am, but also how old the people are who made the games back then.
Well, yeah, I was just reading that Martin Kenwright went on to form Evolution with the Psygnosis founder. I remember Psygnosis were quite good, actually. They were good games developers.
It's nice that you say Psygnosis. We always try to say Psygnosis.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's a follow, right? So Psygnosis.
But what is the correct pronunciation? We don't know. How do you say in England?
Well, Psygnosis sounds like it might be better because you'd say psychology. See. So,
okay.
Yeah. So maybe Psygnosis is the way to go. But I remember at the time people used to call it Psygnosis. Back in the day. I didn't realize that came out of Imagine. Of course, Ocean and Imagine were, I think Ocean bought Imagine's label, didn't they? Yeah, okay, didn't know that. I've learned a few things today. I found a video of music I can't remember writing, and I've learned all about what Martin Kenwright did. I'm amazed.
I tried to find your name in the CivNet, but it also hadn't your name in it because it's the Civilization 1 engine and whole code in a plus. But
Oh my God. But the only one we've got is that YouTube video. That's funny. Okay, I'll have to follow that up and see what happened to that. It's weird to go back and look at Civilization. It looks, it was such a big thing at the time. Sorry, it wasn't a big thing when it first started, but now it's such a major thing. Are we on Civilization 6 now or something? Though?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Okay, impressive.
It was a huge milestone in that time, Civilization. I liked it too. It was one of my best Amiga games.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. There was another good game similar to that. Was it Populous or something? Do you remember
Populous,
that?
yeah.
That was a great game, I thought.
But there was no successor anymore.
No. Yeah, that's true. Just kept going.
There is a successor called Godua, which is looks like a bit like it, but it's not so good.
Okay.
Sorry, Godus. Godus. It's called Godus.
God.
Godus.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah,
it's an actual game, or
yeah.
I can see it. Yeah, Godus.
And there were some special versions of Populous. Our Stefan played one for the Game Boy today yesterday.
So Godus was designed by Peter Molyneux as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's still going.
Do you still your old Game Boy games?
I did have one copy which I gave away to somebody of the Super Hunchback game. In fact, I'll show you something. Hold on, just one moment. It was one of the pieces that I translated to a real orchestral thingy, you know.
Ah, yeah.
That's the Super Hunchback stuff. Yeah. So, because there are quite a few people have asked to have it rewritten for orchestral an orchestral setting. So, yeah, that's the only Game Boy game that I remember working on that I really enjoyed. It was a terrible title, but it was fun to do the music. And yeah, we've done quite a lot of rescoring of this one, and there's loads there that I haven't finished yet. So there was a whole folder full of stuff I haven't finished. But yeah, Super Hunchback was the last thing I did on the Game Boy, I think. Or was that The Simpsons? I don't know.
No, it says that you're. Oh, wait, just a second. I had your name in the. It says, I don't know if Ken Griffith Jr. presents Major League Baseball is a Game Boy game or an.
Is that a game? I think that's a SNES game, that.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So then it should be Simpsons, Bart, and the Beanstalk.
Yeah, that's the one.
Beanstalk or Beanstalk?
Yeah, it was a Simpsons game, which was okay, but it wasn't. Yeah, I thought the Game Boy was quite a good machine to work on. Really, it was nice to hear quite a reasonable sound coming out of such a small device. Really.
You did the music and sound effect for Hook, but only on the Game Boy, not on the Amiga or PC.
I think it was the NES as well. You know, the old Nintendo 8-bit. I remember working on Hook for the 8-bit. Yeah, but can't remember doing the Amiga. Just remember doing the NES version of that. But this is what normally happened. You'd work on one particular platform, and then one of your colleagues would take that music data and just translate it. So it used to happen quite a lot, you know. So we used to share the jobs quite a bit.
But you were colleagues. You were not in any way of competition.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there was a little bit of. Sometimes you would get a good project, and you'd think, oh, I wish I could have the other one, but it was pretty much like a job. We used to share quite a lot of ideas and sound data. So if someone managed to get a nice sound out of one machine, we might share that for the next project. So it was usually quite a good relationship, to be fair. Yeah, it was usually quite good. I think when I went to Software Creations, where Tim and Jeff Follin were the main musicians there, and I didn't like sampled music, but by the time I'd worked with Tim, I started to really enjoy working with samples. So Tim taught me a lot. Paul Hughes and Jonathan Dunn taught me a lot about the 64. So you could usually learn from each other. There was not so much competition. It was usually quite. We had some good fun, you know. We sometimes we'd laugh at each other's music as well. You know, we'd say that's just ridiculous, but we used to have a joke about it. So it was quite light-hearted most of the time. I thought Microprose was quite serious, though. It was quite because they started Microprose down in the south of England. They were quite successful games, you know, publishing place, and they started. The reason I worked for them is they created a Manchester office, which lasted only for a couple of years. But I thought the atmosphere at Microprose was a little bit more professional, shall we say? I think working at Ocean was a little bit more. There was less. It was a little bit more laid back, and Microprose was more like a real job. So I felt like I'd grown up by the time I went to Microprose. So, which is good, you know. It's quite nice. Yeah.
Jemand noch eine Frage? Another question?
Questions from the chat or from the panel?
The people from the back in those days, do you still meet with them? Some like, don't know, colleagues from Ocean days?
You are muted.
Thank you. Yeah, the two people that I speak to the most at the moment are Peter Clark and Fred Gray, back in the early video game music days. So they both worked on Ocean titles just before me, and we're working at the moment on a remix project. We're trying to work on orchestral music from the games. So mostly Peter Clark and Fred Gray. I did meet Rob Hubbard a few times. I've not seen Tim for a few years. I haven't seen Jonathan Dunn for a long time. Martin Galway's now in America. I believe he's doing something completely different over there. So yeah, but it's nice to catch up with them now and again, every few weeks. But I mean, recently we've not been able to meet face to face. So we'd like to have a few, you know, go out to a pub and have a few drinks together. And we're planning to do that towards the end of this year. Now COVID is going away a little bit. Hopefully.
We hope the best.
Yeah, hope so. Yeah, it's about time, isn't it? I think we've all done quite well.
I tried to reach Fred Gray the last years. If you can give him my contact and ask if he now would do an interview in the next month, would be great, because 3 years ago he was not able to do it.
Well, I think I'll be speaking to Fred in the next couple of weeks because of this project we're working on. So I can mention that to him, Patrick.
That would be great,
yeah.
Of course. I met him.
I'll do that.
I met him on a convention in London some years ago, and we talked there. But after that, he has no time for an interview, and then I could not reach him anymore. It would be great.
Yeah, he's very, very busy. I think he's teaching now. He's a teacher, a mathematics teacher, I believe. So yeah, I'll drop him a note and see what he says. Yeah,
that'd be great.
No problem.
There's another question in the chat from Lady41, also Lade 41, das klingt sonst komisch. He asked if Matthew likes to watch soccer.
Well, I know there was a big match on today, but I don't normally follow football. Not usually. But this year was quite good with the Euros. I was quite good on, I watched every single game at the Euros this year. So I really enjoyed that. I worked on a football game some years ago, actually.
Striker 95.
That's right, yeah.
I tried to find it, but we didn't have it.
Yeah, it's, I tried to dig out the music. Someone had uploaded it to YouTube a few years ago. And the music it was nice to hear it again. I thought it was quite a good one. It's one that I was quite happy with. And it was probably the last title I worked on before leaving video games. It was around 95, 96, or 94 or something like that. But yeah, that was a good title. The Euros were good. Say again?
Some days ago we talked to Chris Hülsbeck, and he said he had all his source code of all his bits and bytes he ever created. Did you collect your source code? Did you have all the music somewhere? Okay, Civilization, of course.
Yeah. No, I managed to get the source code back from Paul Hughes, who'd I'll see if I can find his website. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, I'll share a little link on the chat. I managed to get a lot of source code from this link, actually.
Oh, okay.
So Paul Hughes was the after Martin Galway. His sound driver was actually really difficult to use. So it sounded great, but it was very hard to write music for it. So Paul wrote the next generation of SID music driver, and he's made that source code available. So I've been able to get some of my stuff from that web page, which is quite good.
Patrick is already typing it into our show notes.
And Maniac too. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm just looking at some of this now. Yeah. So Paul's been able to find some of my old source code from the old music. Good.
I have a bad brain. I do forget so much. Patrick did an interview with you, and did you tell the story with that you worked in a computer store before moving to Ocean? I don't remember it. I have tried to tell it so much.
No, I didn't. No, I never did really. No, I left school. So what happened was when I was 15 years old, I wrote a letter to Ocean Software saying I was interested in coding games and writing music. And could I go to Ocean Software as a work experience, just to spend a couple of weeks? So every 15-year-old in the UK back then would have to spend 2 weeks in a real job to see what it's like to work a 9-to-5 job. So they actually wrote back to me, and I was very surprised because I was a big computer game fan, and so I got this Ocean letter back, and that's when I spent 2 weeks with them. And it was the year after that I'd written some more demos, and just went back when I'd left school at 16. I went back to them and said, could I do some more work? And it was informal. I didn't ask for a job or anything like that. And they said, well, just come in and see what you can do. After a couple of weeks working for them, they gave me the Batman game to do. And I just decided that, right, I've got to do it. I've got to see if I can do it. And they were happy with it, so I just stayed. It all started from a work experience, yeah.
I remember a funny fact from the interview. You said you wrote a game in your youth with, you said rude words and things like that, together with some lads.
Oh, what was that? Sorry, when I was younger.
Yeah.
You wrote a game with a couple.
You said you
with
wrote a
insults?
sort of text adventure with a disgusting sense
Oh
of humor.
yeah, I did. Yeah. I was really into text adventures back then. What we'd written in it was absolutely obscene. You couldn't play it now without being totally offended, because every action that you did came back with something utterly disgusting. Because because when you're a kid and you learn how to code something, the first thing you want to do, well, with my juvenile imagination, the first thing I wanted to do was something extremely rude. So it was a terrible text adventure. Yeah, but that's how we learn how to code, by cracking into other people's code, by using some of the cartridge hackers that you used to have back then, like Freeze Frame and Action Replay. So cracking into the machine code was the first way to learn. You figure out that the music routine would be here, and then some of the sprite drivers would be here, and you just start ripping bits of code out to try and understand how it works. But for some reason, text adventures were really interesting to me, and I always wanted to write a text adventure. I don't know why. I was a big fan of what was it called? Guild of Thieves. That was a good text adventure. Yeah. So I think that's what started it off. In gaming, when I was a kid, I was more interested in text adventures than some of the action games. I was more of a slow gamer. I just wanted to take my time and just enjoy it. I used to like fantasy and science fiction novels and things like that, so I used to enjoy the writing part of it. Yeah, wrote a few text adventures.
What was the name of this game? And was it ever released? Or
No, it was never released. I think it was just something that we used to practice at coding, really. So it was just, just can't remember the name of it now.
Pity. I'm collecting such weird things.
Extra things, yeah.
On which computer did you code that? BBC or what was it? In what year?
That was the Commodore 64.
Okay.
That one.
Later.
Yeah.
And you're still in Batman as the watch on your bed.
Oh yeah. Well, this is my son's room.
Okay.
So, yeah, my son stays here, and there's quite a bit of Batman stuff around. My fiance's gathered a few things. There's a Batman rug down here, Batman clock, and there's some other stuff around here somewhere. Yeah, it's just it's as much as I'd like to have this room, because it's quite nice. There's a bass guitar, there's a bunch of synthesizers, and there's some Batman stuff. And that's my son's room. Yeah, I'm trying to encourage him to play music, but it's not really happening. He's not really picked up on it yet. I think it might happen a little bit later, like it did with me. It wasn't until I was about 13, I think, I started to get into music, into writing music. So I think he's 11 now. I think it's gonna start soon, but this is what we hope, with our kids. It's when you're doing something creative, if you're a painter or a sculptor or filmmaker or something like that, you're always wondering if your kid is going to pick up that talent. So maybe he'll take an interest, but so far he's not really doing anything with it. But there's loads of instruments hanging around here that he can play with if he wants to. He's really into gaming. He's just I sent him a copy of the Midway, the Midway 80s game stuff. So he lives with his mother at the moment, and I sent him a copy of that over the weekend, and he's called me saying that he really enjoys the old school games. He wants to know all about it. He wants to play the 80s style games, so he's playing Defender on his PS4 at the moment. So.
Yeah. The old games. Yeah.
Apparently he's really loving it, so that's quite cute. Very good.
Is there like a music when you got called for doing it like back in the day, which was like, oh man, I'm proud to get this job done, like Batman or?
Yeah, I think there were some jobs that made me feel good for completing them. I think it was good of Ocean to give me Batman because I was quite a bit younger than some of the other guys, and I was quite surprised that they trusted me enough to do that. So I really worked hard on getting that right. And when that was finished, I realized then that if I could finish a title that was quite high profile, I was just thinking myself, I want to do this job for as long as I can because I really enjoy it. So I'll make my best effort at the beginning. And after that, I really started to enjoy it. I think with Batman, it was a little bit of pressure, I just wanted to get it right. So when it was finished, I was happy with that. I think getting your first one done is that's the most important thing. If you can just get past that first title, and after that, I really started enjoying working on the Commodore music. At first, I was a little bit nervous,
Oh, obviously.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I was very lucky to be given that opportunity, really. I tried my best, but I see your arcade cabinets behind you there. What have you got on there? Which one is it?
The one in the back is Sky Shark, and the one in the front has like a 80 in one, which has like the classics like Donkey Kong and 1942 and stuff like that.
I love Donkey Kong. I love those old games.
Yeah, me too.
Playing them with the right controls, it makes a massive difference. It's not the same.
Yeah, I love to kick. I love to kick at the arcade when I lose and shit like that.
Exactly. If I could play them on those cabinets, I tell you what, I was a big fan of when I was younger. Was they're not great games, but the Laserdisc games like Dragon's. Of course, Dragon's Lair.
Matt Doc McKean, stuff like that.
I used to love that. I man it when I was. I went on holiday to Wales I think I was about 13. And I played Dragon's Lair every day for 7 days. On the last day, I finished it. And I couldn't believe I finished it because I'd seen all these other people playing it. And I thought, there's no way you can beat this game. Dragon's Lair was rock hard, You had to remember every single move. On the last day, we finished it. And we were it made the holiday was perfect after that. The most amazing thing.
You spent all your holiday pocket money in that machine.
Yeah. a lot of my
quite right.
Back then it was 10 pence. 10
pence for Laserdisc.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cheap.
It was cheap, yeah. Yeah. It was quite cheap back then. And there was another one called Space Ace, but that wasn't I didn't really enjoy that as much. I thought Dragon's Lair was just the best. I absolutely loved that. I was obsessed with it. I used to walk past the place, I hear the music, the attract mode. I just went straight in. So, yeah. But these days, I'm happy to play something like Pac-Man or something like that. I think those games are just, I could never get tired of those games. Every now and again, I'll put them on. But to have them in a cabinet like that's the best. I don't think it's the same when you're on, the computer. It's not the same.
Yeah, but you guys still have some arcades like in the pubs in the UK, right? Don't you?
Yeah. Well, when was the last time I saw that?
Okay.
I haven't seen one for a long time. I think they started to disappear a few years ago. Yeah, it's you see most of the pubs have gambling, slot
the gambling machines. Yeah, the gambling machines. Yeah, gotcha.
It's a shame because games like back in the 80s, we had games like Q*bert and things like that. They were always in chip shops. These British fish and chip shops.
Yeah.
So the kids would go in and buy chips because for some reason British kids were obsessed with chips, which I was never interested. But I used to go in and play the games, and the people behind the counter selling the fish and chips, they'd be like, well, why are you not coming to buy the food? We never bought the food, just went in to play the game because they look just like the cabinet behind you there, that classic sort of walnut thing. So we just used to play the games. But now we don't really have them. I can't remember the last time I saw one, to be honest with you.
Oh, you still have some arcades like on your Yeah, the rest stops at the motorways and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, like if you go to the coast, if you go to one of the beaches or something like that, yeah, you'll have arcade games. Yeah, in fact, I always have to go into those places. Normally, it's you'll have a bowling alley, you know, and something like that. Wherever you see the bowling alley, you've usually got a few arcade games, but the new ones are not. What do people make new arcade games now? I don't know anything about them.
Neither do I.
Yeah, it's just the old ones.
Yep, exactly.
In London, there are 3 arcade pubs now. They opened up 2 new ones with old arcade machines, I read. I was in the first one 5-6 years ago, and now there should be 3 new arcade pubs in London.
Really? Now, London, that's the good thing about London. Whenever I've worked down there, they do have, because I'm based in Manchester, and we have 1 or 2 things here, but London is always the first place to, you know, innovate with things like this. So when they get an idea, they'll really push it. So yeah, it's nice to go down to London now and again. Really enjoy that.
It's called the 4 Quarters, I think.
But you know, do have a Cristiano, and so everything will go right now.
So I'm probably going to have to head off because I think I can hear my fiance's up and about, and we're going to get something to eat. So a bit like Noah, my stomach is rumbling now, so I'm going to get some dinner. But very happy to be here and great to talk to you again. And really, thank you for going up on that shelf.
No problem.
That was really good.
And paid by calories, it's no problem.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to come and say hello face to face. And we really want to do that, so we'll make that effort, and we'll let you know if we can come down and say hello. We'll drive over, you know. Probably that's what we'll do. Well, thanks very much for inviting me. If there's anything I can do to help what you're doing, then please let me know. Because it was a good chat. I enjoyed that.
Likewise.
Thanks for joining us.
Excellent, guys.
Hope to see you again.
Yeah, definitely.
In Hamburg.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see you again. So
#visit Hamburg.
Exactly. I think Hamburg's where it's happening. We're going to get on that train.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Bob.
Ich mache nochmal einen kurzen Trailer und könnte noch kurz einen kleinen Abschluss hier machen. Aber wie gesagt, ich denke, heute ist Sonntag. Heute sollten wir vielleicht nicht übertreiben. Oder was sagt ihr so?
Gurkenzeit.
Wir können auch jetzt direkt den Abschluss machen. Ich habe da kein Problem. Ich merke nämlich tatsächlich auch, ich müsste auch mal was essen wieder.
Oh, ich werde schon wackelig hier an den Beinen.
Die Zeit rennt nämlich tatsächlich. Also wir müssen uns erstmal natürlich nochmal bei allen bedanken, die uns heute geholfen haben. Auch nochmal vielen, vielen Dank an alle Teilnehmer beim Retro-Bingo. Das war wirklich super, die beiden Tage. Wir machen mit Sicherheit im September das auf jeden Fall weiter. Es gab jetzt inzwischen schon wieder E-Mails, wenn wir das nächste Retro-Bingo machen. Ja, es wird kommen. Und an alle unsere Retrokompott einmal vielen Dank vor und hinter den Kulissen. Wir sammeln auch wieder Videos bis Ende des Monats, nicht unbedingt für eine Gala, aber für einen tollen langen Stream mit abendlichen Talk. Das werden wir im September auf jeden Fall mal einen Tag lang machen wieder, aber nicht als Gala. Also etwas einfacher in Anführungszeichen, aber weil auch die Videos sehr, sehr gut angekommen sind dieses Mal. Wir hatten teilweise bei den Videos schon in den Morgen- und frühen Nachmittagsstunden sehr, sehr gute Resonanz. Also das war ganz, ganz toll. Danke an euch da auf jeden Fall nochmal. Ja, dann würde ich mal sagen, dann nehmen wir jetzt alle was essen und
ja, mangiare.
Und
gut,
gucken mal, was passiert.
Ich möchte mich auch noch bedanken. Das muss ja nicht nur mal Patrick tun, der macht es natürlich immer in unser beider Namen, aber ich danke euch auf jeden Fall für eure Arbeit. Wenn ich mal so in die Zoom-Konferenz reingucke, auch wenn nicht alle mehr da sind, die uns geholfen haben, glaube ich doch noch, dass es mal wieder gezeigt hat, wie toll wir so als Einheit funktionieren. Auch wenn die arme Miri jetzt gegangen ist, aber
irgendwann muss man Sonntagabends auch mal schlafen gehen. Außerdem hat sie den ganzen Nachmittag sicher ausgepowert beim Frösche lecken und so weiter.
Frösche lecken. #Frösche
Ja,
lecken.
Entschuldigung, das ist nun mal eine Tatsache. Das muss man auch mal so ganz klar wieder sagen. Nee, war wirklich ein toller Tag, auch wenn, wie gesagt, der Anlass ja nicht so schön war, aber wir machen auf jeden Fall solche Art Veranstaltungen weiter. Da kamen auch viele Bitten, aber vielleicht nicht in dem Volumen. Aber ihr werdet uns auch auf Twitch nicht los und ich denke auch im Laufe der Woche passiert ja wieder einiges.
Oh ja.
Auf jeden Fall geht es da weiter. Da nochmal vielen Dank an Dani für die Hintergrundarbeit und auch natürlich für die tollen Ideen bei den Streams. Ja, wir machen dann mal hier Feierabend, sage nochmal wirklich Danke an alle und verabschieden uns bis gleich, wollte ich gerade sagen. Nein, also bis demnächst auf jeden Fall. Und ja, wir gucken mal, wie es hier weitergeht. Was wir jetzt hier bei uns im Museum, in der Location machen, werden wir in den nächsten Tagen veröffentlichen. Die Tendenz geht dahin, dass wir den Donnerstag halt ganz normal mit 3G machen und dann bei Anmeldung bei größeren Gruppen auf Wunsch halt eine 2G-Variante anbieten. So in die Richtung wird das gehen, das müssen wir nochmal genau abchecken. Aber irgendwas in der Richtung wird passieren, da wir, wie gesagt, allen weiterhin die Möglichkeit bieten wollen, uns hier auch zu besuchen. Ja, alles andere folgt später, würde ich sagen. Ich denke mal, das war ein toller Tag und die Zeit rennt. Wir haben jetzt schon, ich kann noch mal einmal ganz kurz, ich habe eben gerade einmal in die Statistik geguckt, die ist schon wieder toll. Wir haben eben gerade die 1000 Zuschauer wieder überschritten, allein für den heutigen Stream, was ich ganz, ganz toll finde. Und wir hatten teilweise 40 Leute im Chat und andere Zahlen, die heute wirklich sehr, sehr gut waren. Also das war auf jeden Fall eine schöne Resonanz. Vielen, vielen Dank und bis bald. Hat noch jemand ein Schlusswort? Sonst drücke ich
Ja, vielen Dank fürs Followen vom Syntax-Terror.
Das klingt schön.
Ob das jetzt nicht ein Bot ist, wir wissen es nicht.
Nee, ich glaube
erfahren.
nicht. Das
Okay.
hört sich eigentlich ziemlich nerdig an.
Error an und einem Schreibfehler. Okay, wir werden sehen. Vielen Dank an euch alle, wie gesagt. Und ja, was folgt, werdet ihr demnächst dann hören und sicherlich mitbekommen.
Bis bald.
Tschüss.
Wiedersehen, bis morgen.
Servus.
Macht's gut.
Ich brauche noch ein paar Sekunden, das Abschlussbild zu finden.